the Wednesday afternoon meeting of the Portland City Council on Wednesday, April 19th. Carla, please call the roll.
Here.
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 Here. Here is the statement that we need to read at the beginning of meetings. The purpose of council meetings is to do the city's business, including hearing from the community on issues of concern. In order for us to hear from everyone and to give due consideration to matters before the council, we must all endeavor to preserve the order and decorum of these meetings. To make sure that the process is clear for everyone, I want to review some of the basic guidelines, which I hope will help everyone feel comfortable, welcome, and safe at the meeting, and also ensure that decorum is maintained. People may sign up for public testimony on first readings of reports, resolutions, and ordinances. If you sign up, your testimony must address the matter being considered at the time. Please state your name for the record. We don't need your address. And if you're a lobbyist, please disclose that. If you're part of an organization, that's also helpful to know. Individuals have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light's going to light up. And when your time is done, the red light comes on. Conduct that disrupts the meeting, for example, shouting or interrupting others' testimony or interrupting during council deliberations, is not allowed. People who disrupt the meeting face ejection from the meeting. If there's a disruption, I'll issue a warning that if any further disruption occurs, anyone who's disrupting the meeting will be subject to ejection for the remainder of the meeting. Anyone who fails to leave the meeting after being ejected will be subject to arrest for trespass. If you'd like to show your support for something, thumbs up, please. If you don't want to show your support, thumbs down. So with that, we'll get started. The first item is a time certain item.
Item 388, accept the Portland Design Commission 2017 State of the City Design Report.
Commissioner Udaley.
Mayor and colleagues, it's a pleasure to introduce the Portland Design Commission's State of the City Design Report. The first item of business is to thank the dedicated volunteers who serve on that commission. This commission has met 3 times a month in 2016 and the first quarter of 2017, sometimes more pending retreats, appeals, or the state of the city that we're here for today. And often for many hours as they review land use cases and provide design advice. They're a dedicated, hardworking group that include David Wark, the chair, Tad Savinar, vice chair, Julie Livingston, Don Vallister, Jessica Molinaire, Andrew Clark, and Sam Rodriguez. Please all stand up so council can recognize you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. This commission will be presenting their 5th report before council, but they have been operating in the city of Portland since around 1980, providing leadership and expertise on urban design and architecture and on maintaining and enhancing Portland's historical and architectural heritage. This report comes to council at an important time for the city and its design overlay districts, as development and construction is unprecedented in the history of design review. These neighborhoods deserve the appropriate protection and predictability of quality infill that meets our density goals and inevitable growth. I look forward to hearing more today from the commission members and interested public, and I'm committed to supporting the commission in all of its efforts. Commission Chair David Wark, please come forward with your presentation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for giving us this audience to share with you what's been happening in our great city for the last year and about 3 months. So to start off, Portland, our little big city, is experiencing, as you said, Commissioner Udaley, experiencing perhaps the most dramatic changes in its history. People and businesses are moving and visiting here at a record pace, and new buildings are going up in every neighborhood in response. And this is what it feels like to most of us these days in most neighborhoods, a sense of hypergrowth. Fortunately, Portland, unlike many other American cities, has a plan for this growth called the Comprehensive 2035 Plan, and also a mechanism for guiding the quality of development which is the Portland Design Commission and Design Review. And here are the 7 current volunteers serving on the commission. Julie Livingston, project manager for Home Forward, focusing on affordable housing projects. Architect principal, Don Ballister with the Ballister Coral Architecture Firm. Sam Rodriguez, who's our public at large member. He's a senior managing director for Mill Creek Residential Trust. Myself, David Warwick, I'm the RAC appointee, and I'm a principal with Henneberry Eddy Architects. Jessica Molinar, talented design architect with Colab Architecture and Urban Design. Andrew Clark, a founder of Hue Development, focusing on Northeast infill residential projects. And Tad Savinar of Tad Savinar Studio, Urban Design. So where does Design Commission and Design Review in the Type 3 zones in the city fall? In the Central City, in the area in red, that's called the Central City District, downtown South Waterfront, Pearl District, Conway, which is our newest district per se, Lloyd District, and the Central East Side. And then the pink area to the right is the Gateway District. These are the areas in which the cases that come before us are constructed. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt. Does somebody have a radio on?
I think it's outside.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And so the primary purpose of design review and the commission is to help development in terms of planning documents, policies, buildings, to meet the larger goals of the city. And those goals are exemplified in the Central City Plan Design Goals. And they're the bookends of these goals. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the first one is just urban design excellence, the qualitative aspects of design. And 4 out of the next 8 talk about the human condition, pedestrian experience, humanization, humane, and human scale. And it is through this lens, along with design guidelines, that we review projects. And I just wanted to kind of do a summary of what we've been experiencing, what we've been seeing, what's been coming before us. And they break out into about 3 different types of categories. We've approved 7 significant public projects. On the upper left is the Knight Cancer Research Building. Next to that is the Center for Health and Healing South. Multnomah County is just starting their new large health building near the train station. And the Multnomah County Courthouse is being proposed. I think they've started broken ground at the Hawthorne Bridgehead. And maybe just a pause for a moment in remembrance of the VQ that was on that site. And so the lower left is the Oregon Convention Center Hotel, which is the largest hotel in Portland, a public-private joint venture. The PSU Stott Center, the basketball pavilion on the campus and the park blocks. And then the new PSU School of Business, which is under construction also.
Can I just make a comment? Because you said you referred to the Multnomah County Health Building.
Commissioner, your microphone's, something's wrong.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. We'll have to get used to that. Just a quick comment on the picture of the Multnomah County Health Department building.
Right.
And you described it as being near the train station. Of course, at the city, we say it's near Bud Clark Commons.
Oh, sure.
But
Right.
the reason we
Okay.
say that, and Julie is smiling, is
Right.
that Bud Clark Commons won the award as the best designed building of its kind given by HUD. And originally, Bud Clark Commons was designed to be a suburban-style building that filled the whole lot. And it was, in fact, a couple of designers and and developers who said, that's not urban form. And so it was redesigned and restacked as a half-block urban form building, which freed up the other half for the health department building. So I think another example of good design thinking informing opportunities.
And you can see the corner of that building to the right of the county health building in the image there. The next type of projects we've seen are just a jump in scale. Some in height, others in area, some occupying 4 city blocks, and one actually occupying 33 acres in the South Waterfront. The Lloyd District on the upper left is a 5/1 with 689 apartment units. Perhaps the most densified section of the city is this 4 blocks of Oregon Square in Lloyd Center. Burnside Bridgehead has a bookend to the Yards project at 5th MLK. And in the upper right is the Zidell Shipyard, which will, when fully built out, include 2,600 apartments, 1.5 million office space, square feet of office space, and meaningful recreation access to the Willamette River. And then the others on the bottom are in the Pearl and downtown, except in Sleepy Goose Hollow, on the bottom right, a 250-foot tower on the former Oregonian press blocks is proposed. So we're seeing change, as I said, in every neighborhood. And this may not be much of a surprise to anyone, but by far, the most common project type that we reviewed is the mixed-use housing type in every part of the Central City and Gateway. 33 projects in total with just over 4,000 apartment units. And you can see the diversity of that type of architecture, which we'll refer to in a little bit relative to the guidelines.
Do you know offhand how many are in Gateway?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you know offhand how many of those projects are in Gateway?
Well, there are more than the one upper left is the one pictured, but there are 3 others.
Great,
But I
thank
didn't
you.
show every project.
No,
It
that's- I just was wondering.
Otherwise, we'd be looking at little, we couldn't discern what they are at that
It's
point.
just a question for information, not a criticism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is more for effect, just the scale of the projects, the number. And then the next project type, affordable housing. Out of those 33 mixed-use housing projects, 5 included affordable units. And of the 4,000-plus units that are in those projects, 482 were affordable units, or approximately 12% of our new apartments or living units were affordable housing units. 2 of those are, well, let me start by saying the one in the middle is actually partly a design commission result of the Broadway Tower behind it, which was identified as a public benefit associated with that project. So the second phase of the Broadway Tower project actually includes affordable housing units that were part of that public benefit to give them more FAR in height. And so, which brings us to the design guidelines. And when we kind of saw the variety of architecture that's been proposed, that's a result of the design guidelines, which are intended to be flexible in how they're met. And they do not prescribe a specific type or style of architecture. And I'd like to dig into 2 guidelines that will illustrate how they help shape significant projects in the city. And the first is contribute to a vibrant streetscape, and the second is about context. And as Jane Jacobs said, streets and their sidewalks, the main public places of a city, are its most vital organs. And so just to give you a sense of what the city was, where it was headed before design review, this is the character of many blocks in our city in the pre-1980 era, where there were very blank, lifeless corners and anti-pedestrian areas marked by the automobile. So, uh-oh, what happened there? Out of memory. Ruh-roh. Sure what that means. Uh-oh. I have we have a technical person. Just when I was rolling too, you know? Well, I don't know what happened there, but it didn't download the whole thing or something. She came in earlier and downloaded it. All right. Yeah, okay. Okay, let me just put that in there. Okay, all right. Okay, and then view. Okay, we'll catch up here. There we go. I think it's, okay, I went there. Yeah, so, okay, here we go. Starting back up. So this was pre-design review and design commission, and this is post-design review, design commission, which transformed something that was very unengaging, very removed, very anti-pedestrian to something that is now pedestrian-centric, and something we almost take for granted these days, that this is what our city is going to continue to build. And so when we have this was for a project at 13th Avenue in Overton, a large 250-foot high-rise, which in and of itself was probably fine, but related to contribute to a vibrant streetscape, That being a primary guideline, this project still proposed something much different than that. And what it proposed was basically an auto court drop-off area and driveway that also did not have any active streetscape, storefront, active ground floor use. And so after helping point out that this was actually a guideline that we would like them to follow, giving them advice on how to change their approach and the first floor, that what was a former automobile court in this area then became retail, a nice small kind of recessed courtyard for major entrance, and then on this corner, another area for retail and active use, and then tucking in a garage entrance within the building form itself. And so what came out of that was what was going to be auto-centric and obviously not a part of the guidelines now is on its first floor, one of the more successful projects in the Pearl District relative to access and openness to live-work units, individual housing units, and while it's not in this picture, that is the retail to the right there. The second example of application of the guidelines is a project at 4th and Harrison, which was proposed to take advantage of a massive amount of FAR and bonus height. Actually, I'm not sure it did the bonus height, but definitely FAR. And it abuts a very important historic, a place that's on the National Register of Historic Places in the city, the new Halpern Open Space Sequence District, and which probably was perhaps one of the most important and influential urban landscapes of the 20th century, and therefore deserving of its listing on the National Register. And so that little red square is the site in each of these diagrams. And so relative to massing and context, the proposal came in, this is Pettigrove Park at that northeast corner. It came in with a lot of bulk associated with that corner, robbing this park of its natural light and space, and also not setting back from it like the other buildings in that district. So after that first DAR, we offered up our comments on how they could better respond to the park. This was their second DAR, which was only a sliver of maybe movement in this area relative to our remarks about how to treat that historic district. And then they finally kind of began shaving off some of their bonus FAR, and then we encouraged them to continue in this direction. And then the final design actually is an L-shaped building with active use on this lower level, and then kind of townhouse band above that. So much improved building overall, and definitely a much better response to what is a very important open space in our city's history. And this is the
Could I ask
rendering.
you a question on
Sure.
that? Could you go back? And
Sure.
here's where I always just sort of have some questions. And I trust your judgment, but the difference obviously between the first and the second, the third and fourth is obvious.
Sure.
From a design guideline perspective, what's the difference between the third and the fourth? When you looked at the third,
Sure.
and you said that's not quite right.
Right.
What is it you're seeing there?
Right. Well, it was in comparison to the other buildings around it also, where there is much more open space and breathing room, and set back from what I would call the kind of east and the north property lines. The Cyan it was right over here, which is a building about the same height, which is really just a bar that is parallel to 4th Avenue over here. And so we just felt that since we were talking about bonus FAR and not the base FAR, that they were able to better respond to, I think, light and air and open space.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And the other guideline, won't get too deep in the weeds here, but there is the other guideline that talks about enhance, embellish, and identify areas reflecting the local character within that district. So there's more than one that went into that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And this is kind of the result where I think most everyone came away pretty satisfied with the result of this process. And I think you will hear that from someone probably that you will recognize their name that is going to read a letter to that effect. So some of our accomplishments, in addition to meeting as often as we are now, and we review and comment on such planning documents as the mixed-use zone, residential infill planning document, the Central City 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the Design Overlay Zone Assessment program that has been in the works for about a year, and I think you'll get a briefing on that within the next week or two. And then we've also mediated solutions with PBOT and other stakeholders relative to trying to help applicants get through the process much easier. Some archaic or otherwise, I guess, impediments to getting approved earlier. We've kind of flushed out many of those, including what you would think would be kind of a basic kind of thing is a cover in a utility vault, and that being basically negotiated over a year and a half of an acceptable utility vault. Parking garage entrance doors, there's a condition where PBOT preferred to have the door set back 20 feet so that a car could queue up and when it going in, so it wouldn't block the sidewalk. However, that sets up a very unappealing urban condition of a 20-foot dark hole on every block where every garage door would be. So finally recognized that there are doors called speed doors out there, and so that allowed the door to come out to the sidewalk and satisfy that condition and also satisfy PBOT's need to get cars in and out of buildings quicker. These are very, very detailed issues, but they become significant impediments in terms of time and money for applicants. So we very much try to work with that within that system and change it. The Arcade District also had a major encroachment process that added 6 months to projects if they wanted to meet the guideline, which we encouraged, which is to build over the sidewalk in that Arcade District. So that was eliminated through negotiations with PBOT and through a former commissioner. Have worked on identifying public benefit for projects that ask for extra FAR in height. The Broadway Tower is an example I cited a few minutes ago, in which additional affordable housing units were part of the deal, along with funding for the study and improvement of the Parks blocks that immediately east of that second phase project. And we also authored the best practices document, which has been retitled A Guide to the City's Portland Design Review Process, which outlines many aspects of the process that gives insight into applicants on how to better, but more easily get through the design review process and expectations of the Design Commission relative to different topics. And we can go into that in a little more detail if you'd like. But basically, it gives them the current views and expectations of the Design Commission. And then in terms of design advice, and with our pay scale, you can consider this free advice. And so one of the things that we've been working on and with DOZA also is to simplify the design guidelines. And that might occur under these kind of 5 or so headings: under context, massing, active ground floor use, quality in terms of design quality of ideas and also of materials, and perhaps a sustainability guideline in some way. Consider a minimum development threshold. We're seeing a lot of projects that are underbuilding in our already crowded city, and as each site builds upon itself in an underutilized way, it just puts more pressure on other sites. So that's just something to consider in the future. Also establish a comprehensive strategy for truck loading and service. We're also seeing larger projects which require larger and more number of loading bays. So that takes up more space in a building's facade, which then hands that over to a less active space that then minimizes or reduces the amount of active space on a block. And as we get more of those, we lose the activity on the street that's so critical. The idea of creating a citizen academy to be more inclusive and provide information to neighborhoods and individuals about how to participate in the process. And then the Arcade District, as we stated before, there is a guideline that requests applicants and their designers to build over the right-of-way as part of that historic expansion of Burnside. There is a lease fee associated with building over the right-of-way, which to us doesn't seem fair that the city asks people to build over the right-of-way and then charges them for it. And also to simplify that agreement between the city and the owner. That has been a thorn in the side of applicants because the rate of that lease often tilts it in an unfavorable light relative to their pro forma.
Is
So
that
then-
specific to the East Burnside district, or is that in general?
That's just the Arcade District, right.
Right.
Right, because the others, you can do a major encroachment elsewhere, but that's still that long process. But for the Arcade District, because we're asking the applicants to design over it, the impediments and the burden to do that should be removed.
I agree. It feels like we're playing on both sides of
Yes.
that equation.
Right, exactly. And it took a while to just parse out the issues when applicants would come in and be very reluctant to do that when it's such a positive aspect. They can actually gain square footage, but they didn't want to do it. And so as we dug into it, we kind of figured out that, oh, here's the problem.
Well, and we want to keep your process clean.
Right.
And when there's a financial incentive to potentially design them in that direction, it doesn't look good.
Right, agreed, right. And so these recommendations will help clarify, simplify, and streamline the review process for design teams. It would be a process that is more accessible to the public, listens more closely to neighbors and applicants, is fair, and is more predictable. In other words, a process with legitimacy. It will result in better buildings and an even more active pedestrian realm, while helping us realize that the Portland we have prescribed in our 2035 comprehensive plan. And then I want to actually, with much enthusiasm, kind of end on this note about design excellence. And periodically, a project comes before a design commission that truly stands out among its peers. And the framework truly impressed the design commission. It embodies everything design review is seeking, including a meaningful expression of that often head-scratching guideline, emphasize Portland themes. In this case, themes of creativity, innovation, and social responsibility. To begin with, the framework is an exceptional design that openly embraces the pedestrian realm with a significant amount of glazing and canopies. It also incorporates a public community room and terrace on the second floor, contributing more life and energy to the streetscape. The exterior facades have depth and interest and are composed of a high quality and well-detailed metal panel system. It neither needed nor requested special consideration from the city or the design commission during the review process, instead relying on the experience and creative talents of their project team, which included co-developers Project and Home Forward, Lever Architects, KPFF Engineers, and Walsh Construction. Secondly, Framework is an affordable housing project located in the Pearl District, which we all know is expensive real estate, addressing our city's urgent need to house our most vulnerable citizens. Framework represents itself as a confident addition to the Pearl, offering a dignified home for its residents. And finally, Framework incorporates an emerging sustainable construction technology, CLT, or cross-laminated timber construction, made from a renewable resource and one of Oregon's most abundant resources, which is trees, and specifically Douglas fir. When completed, Framework will be the tallest wood building in the United States constructed with CLT technology, which will be manufactured in Oregon, a watershed movement for our state's timber industry and its evolution into a 21st century industry. For these reasons, exceptional design, specifically raising the level of design for affordable housing, and innovation with potential far-reaching impacts to Oregon's economy, the Portland Design Commission is pleased to present its first ever Design Excellence Award to Framework. And in closing, if I might, as our little big city continues to attract more and more new residents and we continue building to accommodate them, high quality and innovative design becomes an imperative if we are to achieve higher density while also enhancing the livability of our urban environment. At a deeper level, for us to hold on to the essence of Portland. And design review in partnership with visionary planning will help us achieve this. So thank you. So
Thank you.
going to go to the next one. Here we are. So if you have any comments, questions, or otherwise, I'd be glad to address those for you.
Comments or questions, anybody?
Usually, or often in this report, you reflect back on some of the accomplishments of things that have been on the list for a long time.
Right.
And I'm wondering, were there any landmark processes that fulfilled that for the Design Commission this past year?
that brought up I'm sorry, I didn't quite,
Well, I'm thinking, for instance, of the Skidmore Design Guidelines,
Sure.
which you asked us on multiple occasions or multiple years in a row to adopt, and we finally got through that process.
Right.
I think that was the year before last. Was there anything else that had been on the Design Commission's to-do list?
well, I think one of the to-do lists was to actually have the study for the design overlay zone assessment. I mean, that uncovered a lot of aspects to Design Commission that we recognized could improve about Design Commission and design review, whether it's with the commission or with staff under the Type 2 process. So I think that's a real positive step for everyone. And I think you'll hear this, but we had a briefing last Thursday that everyone recognizes the contributions of the design review process, whether it be with Design Commission or staff, and that our city is no accident the way it's in its present form. It's through a deliberate series of decisions that started about 1980. And that's why our city is very special and why people come here in droves to experience it, because it has such a specialness to it. And so with that, it also has issues that we could improve upon. And as I think to every person associated with it, whether it's staff or the design commissioners, we're committed to improving the process for everyone, as long as the qualitative aspects of it remain intact.
Well, thank you very much
Sure.
for your work over the whole commission. You mentioned that you were involved in the comprehensive plan.
Right.
Did the Design Commission feel that their advice was respected and incorporated into the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, it's such a huge and complex document. But yes, we had several briefings with them and felt we were pretty much heard. I think there's still a couple of little things about that we presented last time about active use, housing as active use everywhere or not. And I think we pointed out some of those examples in 2015 at our State of the Design report. So, but overall, yeah, I think it's a solid document. Same with the mixed use zone, which is was extremely well received by Design Commission and will be very impactful relative to projects that are outside of the D overlay zone. It just sets up a new standard of quality expectations and of density. And so once that's implemented, that will start to, I think, really gain traction in the outer areas, the outer neighborhoods, yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
I have a question. Sure. So we get some criticism from time to time about the quality of affordable housing in parts of our state. And generally, it is...
Sorry, Commissioner, your mic's not on.
Oh, it's the mute thing again.
Sorry. And generally, in my experience, it's private sector housing, like in East Portland, that was designed to last about 15 years without any sense of how it integrates with the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And by contrast, we get virtually no pushback from some of the beautifully designed affordable housing stuff that's going in now in Gateway and Lentz and other things. There might be a debate about who we're serving and location, but the design is an enhancement. So I think we all agree that you can have deeply affordable housing that's beautifully designed, and you can meet both goals. I'm struck that you've given your first award to an affordable housing development that Home Forward has been a party to.
Right.
And Home Forward serves the very poorest people in our community, so they'll have as many 0 to 30 units as they can afford there.
Right.
So with that in mind, the debate we've had over the last couple of years is how to cut red tape to get more production. And the area where I think developers have probably gotten the most traction is to somehow cut red tape, including Design Commission review of projects that serve low-income people. And so there's the specter that we're going to see a degradation of design and quality.
Right.
So what is the state of that question? And I mean, here you are, you're giving an award to a project that shows that you can continue to have high-quality design and deeply affordable. But since there's a tension, and we're being told to get more affordable housing out the door, we have to cut red tape, and design review is an area where there's been efforts to either bypass you or streamline.
Sure.
What is the state of that question?
Well, I would, yes, obviously that's an affordable housing project, and that makes it even more remarkable. I will say that that project would have gotten through on the first hearing if it weren't for an issue with the Bureau of Environmental Services. And it actually...
call out my bureau.
Right, oh, is that it? Sorry. Right. Well, since I'm talking to you, you know. Yeah.
Would sorry be sufficient?
No, because it didn't really have that much of an impact on it.
It was actually a water bureau problem, but they passed the buck.
Probably, right. And so that can be part of the problem, is parsing out when it's design review and when it's interagency approvals and coordination. So it's such a long process, and design review is a small part of the overall process in terms of time. We dug up some numbers because of trying to understand what the time delays might be. And so by law, unless the applicant files for an extension, there's a 120-day fast track that has to occur. You have to be done in 120 days. On average, I think all these projects were at 103 days. So you're always going to have projects that get through less than that and some that get through more than that. And there are a series of factors that you could probably guess what they are. It's whether or not a team comes in fully embracing the process instead of trying to maybe do a workaround. You know, what's their pro forma? What is their mission? I think that it's kind of dangerous to identify one mission above others when we've got so many important issues relative to our city. So those are some of the things that we've been kind of kicking around.
Well, I'll just say, speaking for myself, when I take visitors into the River District, and I ask, which has one of the highest concentration of deeply affordable housing in the city, and I ask them to identify the affordable housing.
Right.
More often than not, they can't.
Right.
And I hope that that is a value that in Portland we continue to honor, that we believe good design and affordable housing can go hand in hand, and we shouldn't sacrifice the one for the other.
Agreed. And these are really long-term investments. And so everyone's been in a building that isn't that well maintained, and one that is, and one that's easier to maintain, and one that isn't. And so the smallest cost of a building is actually building it. The largest cost over time is the energy use and its maintenance. So these are long-term decisions that have really significant impacts.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public testimony on this item?
Were you calling up, Tim, were you going to call the other people up first, or? Okay, will do. I think we have about 12 people signed up. The
Very
first
good.
three, please come on up, are John Carroll, Phil Bell, and Tiffany Schweitzer.
Good afternoon and welcome. Name for the record, please. We don't need anybody's address. And at 2:30 in, you see the yellow light go crazy. 3 minutes, the red light goes crazy.
Shut up.
I didn't say that.
I will.
Very good. Whoever would like to start.
Go ahead.
I'm John Carroll. I'm a developer. Excuse me?
They had to be lit green.
Push.
Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, it's good. Good to go.
Again, I'm John Carroll. I'm a developer, developing exclusively here in Portland for the last 20-plus years. I've been involved at the request of, at the time, Commissioner Blumenauer, to give him 3 months to talk about streetcars. I've been at it now for 23 years, and you put that, the transportation and the infrastructure in a community, and you put that in the context of creating a city, creating appropriate housing, working on increasing the quality of the community through the design review process. That has been my background, and I can tell you that I have been very, very pleased with how the city, over time, over the last 23, 24 years, has really taken the leadership in keeping the development community, myself, of course Tiffany can address that as well, but it kept me focused on whatever building we've looked at, whatever building we've designed, we wanted to bring it to the commission. We wanted to get through the process, but we also wanted a building and create an environment that when you're walking down the street, you want people to say, how did they build that building? wow, that feels good. What's this all about? And that, I think that is a theme that, from our development perspective, we tried to utilize over the years. The whole design review process, people will tell me they complain about it, but I'm very pleased and very comfortable with the process. David Wark is our last project. I'd never had a conversation with him directly before that, but he brought some perspective, and we created a better building, and I think the city's going to be proud of it. And I can't compliment the commission right now that much, or maybe I'm complimenting too much, but they are helping create a city that is safe, that is walkable, that is livable, that is enjoyable, and all of those things. I have evolved. I've been, as I said, involved with streetcar for 20 plus years. I'm now the chairman of First Stop Portland, which has communities come from all over the world to look at Portland. And they ask invariably the questions, whether they're from Sweden or Adelaide, Australia, or wherever they are, come around the world, how did Portland do it? And telling the story through the commission and design review process is very, very important. Next month, we have 145 people from Denver, Colorado that want to come and find out how Portland's doing it. I've just gotten an invitation from Andalusia, Spain, to go and talk to their communities about how you develop infrastructure and how you develop communities with density. And so I can say, as my time is running out, that I think the process is very good here. I compliment the staff, which I've worked with for many years, and I appreciate having been involved with that process. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Bile. I'm the president of GBD Architects. Thanks for having the chance to come and testify you in front of Mayor Wheeler and members of the City Council. I wrote you all a nice letter, so instead of trying to ad-lib it, I'm going to read it to you very quickly. It's a 3-minute letter, I promise. My company, GBD, has been practicing architecture in Portland Central City since 1969. We've completed literally hundreds of projects, small to large, that have navigated the design review process before moving forward to construction. We presented our projects to virtually every design commission since the first one was formed in 1982. We're actively engaged today with the commission. We have 6 major projects that are under review right now. So my point is we're pretty familiar with the process. While a lot has changed during that 35 years of history with the process, some elements haven't, one of which is our respect for the volunteer commissioners who graciously give their time to protect our built environment. They've always been charged with a very, very challenging task, which is to be the final judge and jury in what qualifies for quality in our built environment. This can be a daunting task, highly subjective in nature, and oftentimes substantiated by opinion rather than fact. Does the process work? I think I can say, in my own opinion and many of my peers, absolutely yes, it works. I'm going to borrow a quote from the upcoming DOZA report, which I think you guys are going to review next week, which is to say that there is no question that design review has had a central role in guiding the high-quality development that Portland is known for today. I couldn't agree more with that, and it very simply describes my opinion as well. But as aspirational as the design community might want to be about being completely in control of the design qualities of our projects, there is a very powerful force out there that is often pushing back every step of the way, demanding that we build our projects bigger, build them faster, build them taller, and build them cheaper. Design review is one of the very few tools that we have to push back against and resist those forces. Design review gives us the very distinct advantage that we often need as one of the few tools, as we often need to push our projects to meet a benchmark of quality that the market by itself would not otherwise achieve. Could the process be improved? Of course it can. Every process can. In fact, I've had a chance to thoroughly review the DOZA report that you will be seeing, and I think there's some very good work in there. And there's actually very little in the report that I would take exception to. Some terrific ideas that could be implemented. But let me be clear, design review is not broken. If anything, it's overwhelmed. Never in my 40 years of practice here have we seen the intensity of development that we still are very much in the middle of here in Portland. The impact has been a sudden transformation of our neighborhoods, bringing big city challenges that stretch far beyond how best to design our built environment. Will the intensity subside anytime soon? I don't think so. I think demographics are telling us otherwise. We've created a very livable city, and people are attracted to it. Looks like I'm done. I'm sorry.
That was very good.
Okay, thank you.
You're a good reader, too.
I'm not a fast reader.
No, it was well done. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I suspect I was asked here today because I've taken quite a few projects through design review. My 14th project just went through the city, the process.
Could you state your name for the record?
Oh, that would help.
Sorry.
Huh. Okay. Tiffany Schweitzer, Hoyt Street Properties. I apologize, Commissioner. And on top of that, Hoyt Street has also taken through 2 master plans that also went to design review, as well as increasing FAR from 2 to 1 to 9 to 1, and unlimited height when we were limited to 75 feet 20 years ago. And so I agree with both Phil and John. The process is very good. I do think it works. I do think it can be frustrating at times. But I think overall, the commission does a very good job. Countless hours that they spend that they don't necessarily get the credit for. And I usually go away with something better than I came in with. What I've seen lately, and to Phil's point of so much projects being shown and going through the pipeline, is a lot of people that are ill-prepared. They come into whether it's DAR or design review, and they're in a rush to get their project through for whatever reason, be it cost or timing or trying to get around some amendments that may be in the pipeline. And what I've seen sitting there as I'm waiting for my own turn is not a lot of thought given, not the same thought that we're asking Design Commission to give. People don't take the time to think about all of the things John described, what really makes a neighborhood, what does it feel like at the street level, how does transportation work with it. And so I think that's where design review really comes in and is very effective, because they're thinking not just of the building, but how it works for everything else around it. And I think it is an important tool that we need in this city. And I've had quite a lot of success with this commission as well as others in the past. And I suspect that will continue as long as, you know, we care about the city that I think the three of us here do. And I think the commission does as well. So I appreciate them spending, you know, many hours listening to all of the progress that's happening in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just ask one question? You said design review is not broken, but you said it was overwhelmed. Are there some concrete steps we could take to alleviate that in the near term?
Well, it's a daunting challenge all by itself because we're in such an unusual period in our economy. It's terrific for Portland in many, many ways, but it's also pretty detrimental to Portland and others. The changes that would be necessary are often, or there are several of them that are listed in the report. One of which is to, for example, add a second commission so that we could expand the number of people who are able to review the cases that are coming through so quickly. What we ask of staff, of the commission, is unbelievable. They spend 3 to 4 days of their month, every single month, upwards of 8 to 10 hours at each commission hearing reviewing these cases, and it's not slowing down. We're beating them up, and they need relief.
So here's a question I wanted to ask with regard to that specific recommendation. So you asked a provocative question. You asked the question, what does the community look like? And there's some subjectivity to that. So my question is this: if we took your commission, which presumably has its own history, its own culture, its own norms that are established within the context of the design review standards, if we created a completely different commission to take up the slack, if you will, do you think they would be looking at the projects the same way? Would they have the same outcomes that your commission has, or is there a particular culture to the commission?
Oh, I think we could expect that there would be some strong alignment, and it would really be incumbent upon the staff to communicate that consistency between the different commissions. It would really be detrimental for the two to take divisive roles and look at projects differently than one another. It'd be very, very counterproductive.
Right, or have different standards. You
Yes.
don't want one
Yeah.
commission to be seen as the one that you want to draw as opposed to the other one.
Well, there's certainly the opportunity for different standards to happen outside the central city, standards that are a little bit more appropriate to outlying neighborhoods, and certainly a different commission that is well-versed in those criteria could be very, very successful and serve as a second commission.
Thank you, and I apologize, I don't typically ask questions, but you raised some really interesting issues, and I
Just
appreciate that.
Very, very quickly, the next committee you'd form would be an arbitration committee if you created two commission mechanisms. And that would, my take is that would slow the process down further.
I agree.
Don, I have a quick question for you. I've been on the council since 2008. We're actually starting to get more appeals of design commission decisions to the council. And I'm not sure that's a good thing, partly because
Your microphone, Commissioner, is off.
My understanding, Commissioner, is that we can leave them on the whole time, and they've got this new technology that it does, they figure out if you're talking or not.
There's actually, I've been pushing this button on the stem of it to turn it on.
I think I'll finally get the hang of it by the end of the year.
Different strategies.
I'm sorry. But we've had a few appeals in the last year, and frankly, the rules allow for it. I'm not sure it's a great thing, in part because of all the land use things we do, I find it in some way the hardest, because it has the most discretion. It has the most subjectivity. I mean, you know, other land use stuff we do is heavily prescribed, and the lawyers are walking us through each of the criteria. So any thoughts on why we're getting more, and then how we can perhaps reverse that trend? Because just speaking for myself, I don't want to be the city council that on a regular basis has the final say on that, because I don't think it's the best use of our time, and I'm not sure we're the best equipped body to make those judgments. Just my view.
Two quick things. One, the appeal process is picking up because you have what I would describe as more out-of-towners coming to Portland, Oregon. I'm going to get this project, we're going to get it through the commission, we're going to get it built, and we're going to sell it and flip and make some money. I mean, that's one of the mindsets that I'm starting to see, and Tiffany, you might chime in on that. I think that an appeal process is important, because if it's something that's grave and it's just horrible, then I think it needs to be dealt with. But I would tend to give the commission a little bit stronger hand in that, in terms of making those decisions final and not have to kick it up to the commission level.
That's an important point. It's about whether we view ourselves as de novo and we start doing the design thing, and what level of deference we give, and whether our job is to make sure there hasn't been some significant procedural lapse versus casually substituting our judgment for some big design question.
I agree. Just the parting comment, there was a project, I was in here while somebody brought an appeal to the council many years ago, and I forget who said it, but this person said, well, you know, where I come from, and the council member at the time said, do you know what city you're in now? And he shut up. And I thought we have to, you know, our fingerprints around the world, around the United States, are becoming greater and greater as we continue to grow well and grow smart, and on and on.
Thank you. Next three, please. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Are John Russell, Tad Savinar, and Julie Livingston.
I think we have a letter. Why don't you call one other person? I think John Russell's appearing by letter. Oh, you're John Russell?
I'm going to do my best to be John Russell, but I am Tim Herron with the Bureau of Development Services, and I could start if you would like.
Jump
Great.
in. Thank you.
Thank you. John asked me to read this. Unfortunately, he's in San Francisco on business, and really felt it important that this be read into the record. It's less than 3 minutes. If you don't know who John Russell is, I kind of asked him to coach it himself, because it's hard to describe John Russell. But relative to this matter, John let me know, I'm not sure anyone has more experience than I've had, starting with 8 years on the Landmarks Commission, 4 years on the Planning Commission, and 3 years on the Development Commission as chair. I also served as chair of the Mayor's Business Roundtable for 10 years with former Mayor Vera Katz. So with that, I will read his letter. Gentle persons, I have a vested interest in the success of Design Review because it was my idea when I was a member of the Portland Planning Commission. The project that stirred us to action was the building now known as the Congress Center, which in our opinion failed its responsibilities at the pedestrian level. At that time, we members of the Planning Commission had only 3 criteria for approval: height, floor area ratio, and parking. I believe then, and I believe even more now, that in order to make certain that buildings will last for a century and more are credits to the city, we need a more subjective level of scrutiny. I've seen some wonderful examples of input by the Design Review Commission that resulted in dramatically better projects. In particular, the campus housing project at 4th and Harrison initially turned its back on the Pettygrove Park. Commissioner Warwick talked about that project earlier. In the course of several hearings, the building improved to the satisfaction of everyone, even, I believe, the developers. Having said that, no matter how well a regulatory statute is written, there are inevitably exceptions that don't fit the rules. In the case of Design Review, I don't believe there are sufficient exceptions in the statutes that could save both the applicants and the city significant time and money. As a recent example, we are spending $1.5 million on the reconstruction of the tenant improvements inside the Cushman and Wakeman office on the terrace level of the 200 Market Building. We considered recessing the doors to the outer terraces some 18 inches. Had we done so, we would have been subject to Design Review, and thereby the project would have delayed for a minimum of 8 weeks. We and the Design Review staff agreed that the change was both de minimis and invisible to the public, but the staff had no authority to approve it. In my opinion, city staff needs to be empowered to make common sense judgments about the applicability of certain codes. The safeguard, I believe, is that staff's decision, although final at the time it is made, would need to be sent out via notice to the same group of neighbors who would receive notification as part of the normal process. In closing, I know most of the members of the Design Commission and I admire each of them. The city owes them personally a great deal of thanks for the many hours of volunteer time devoted to make our city a better place.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Tad Savinar. I'm the Vice Chair of the Design Commission currently. David Warwick likes to tell the story of visiting Portland many times during the 70s and the 80s before he ultimately decided to move here in 1988. And he moved here, as he tells the story, specifically because of its architecture and its built urban environment. He has been the chair of this commission for 2.5 years. He has served on the commission for 9 years. The role of the chair is part traffic cop, part city attorney, part architect, part historian, part mediator, part rally squad, and many other parts. When I came back from college in 1973 to my hometown of Portland, I decided that I would give 1/3 of my time in volunteer services, which I have done up until this day. And during that commitment to my city, I've sat on a lot of panels and task forces and committees, and I've seen a lot of chairs and leaders and facilitators. Never have I seen a citizen volunteer so even-handed, so accurate, so visionary, so considerate, and so thorough. The city and its citizens have been fortunate to have a uniquely qualified individual participate and ultimately lead the Design Commission. And I wanted to acknowledge this as a peer, but I wanted to acknowledge it in front of you in this room today. We have many thanks for David Warwick. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Livingston, and I have just a few comments to make this afternoon that may not rise to the same level as Tad's. Thank you, Tad. The first is I wanted to follow up on a point that David made in his presentation. The DOZA report makes a recommendation that we roll out something akin to a Citizens Academy. When you receive the DOZA materials next week, you'll see a recommendation that we better communicate the role of urban design and the D overlay tool. And DOZA actually recommends that we do this through improving the public information and education process, and that we also hold applicant orientations on a regular basis. So this is going to be one of the big goals of the design review staff and design commission during 2017. We want to roll out better tools for public involvement. The goal is better participation from applicants, from neighbors, from neighborhood associations, and from all citizens of Portland. Greater participation by the public and a greater understanding of the D overlay will hopefully lead all of Portland citizens to be advocates for the design review process, because I think that it's fairly clear that the reason we love the city that we have today is largely due to how active design review has been over the course of the last 30 years. So also you will be seeing more appeals. Thank you, Commissioner Fish, for asking the question about appeals. I wanted to be sure to touch on this because we are hearing so many more cases now than we ever have in the past. The appeals, I believe, are proportional to the quantity of the cases that are in front of the Design Commission now. Of the 4 cases that have been appealed since I've been a commissioner, 3 of them have been appeals of conditions. So the cases have been approved, but they've been approved with conditions. Only 1 has been an appeal of a denial. And third, Commissioner Udaley, you made reference to density goals and inevitable growth in your introduction. I wanted to take just a minute to focus on the increase in density that we can expect in close-in neighborhoods. There will be a great change in the central city in between now and 2035. The Portland plan, I think you know that the expectation is 135,000 additional households by 2035. Central City will have a great number of those housing units. In 2016, there was 1 housing project in the Central East Side, 85 units, that was approved. So far in 2017, 433 housing units have been approved in the Central East Side. So the Central East Side is going to change significantly, and we are going to see a major uptick in both the scale and the density of the housing that is proposed in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Next 3, please.
Are Thomas Robinson, Bob Hastings, and Teresa Rayford.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
I'll go on the order.
Do you need to pull up your presentation, or?
Oh, no, I'm just testifying on aye, but I was the 3rd person, so.
Okay. While we cue this up. And, okay. I'm Bob Hastings, agency architect for TriMet, and I'm here to share some acknowledgments about the design review process with my colleagues, Teresa Boyle with PBOT, and also Tim Herron with Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm going to quickly scroll through my slides for the benefit of everyone. The main points I want to make is that we have established a role of collaboration between our bureaus and with TriMet. We have created a document over the years, a compendium of elements that have gone before design review, and this benchmark is now established a level of quality in the city. This is where we go from, not where we go down. And we've done this again in collaboration with the process of design development through the design review advisory process. We've worked with several of the commissioners or commissions over the years, so it's an iterative process, but it was established back in the time when we recognized that we had things that we needed to do for our transit projects in terms of the elements of consistency, how it runs, how it works, how people understand how to use it. But we also had an opportunity to do elements of distinction. And these are the ways that you heard the term context relates to the projects that we have done over the years and will continue to do into the future, knock on wood. So on the left, you have a view of the new shelters on the orange line that provide the basic shelter and protection for our patrons, as well as the first ever eco-track that was put at the Lincoln Station. And that was not hubris that we did that. That was something that actually came through the design review process with the commissioners about how do we test and innovate on light rail projects that actually contribute to the quality of the neighborhoods in which they travel. We also received early assistance with the commission. We were looking at alternatives for a big, long structure that's going to go over Harbor Drive. Again, this is a way that our infrastructure projects, this sort of linear building, if you will, of 7.5 miles, could contribute every foot of the way to the quality of the streets with which we operate. We have developed this as a process because the commission trusts that we have understanding of what quality is in the public realm. And they also see that we are so engaged with our public and with both our users as well as our neighborhoods in how we implement these projects. Just to roll through some of the projects that you're probably familiar with, the mall revitalization project in downtown, bringing even more public art onto the thoroughfare, changing the nature of the streets and the stations so they become more active, as David was talking about in terms of the streetscape for people. And then the Orange Line, South Waterfront, which has really helped move forward some of the other projects that you'll see from Zidell Yards and OHSU. But we continue to take that level of quality, not just in the D overlay, but through the whole system that we design. We do. So just in making my point is that when I hear about the DOZA report and wanting to have a citizens within our neighborhoods, within the neighborhoods that we go in, inside the D overlay, outside the D overlay, this is extremely important because that's where we really hear what people value and what they both are concerned about, but what are their hopes. We bring that into the commission process, and sometimes they're helpful making those points to the commissioner, but also that sense of engagement that we have with each commission that we went through. As we look down the road to the future, we are going to be building on the successes and the relationships that we have established into the future. How those projects play out, you'll see them coming through on the commission in the future.
Commissioner Fish.
I just wanted to say, because you're very heavy on the Orange Line here, that just to compliment TriMet for what you ended up with. I now...
Microphone's not on.
Sorry. I live downtown now, and so it's Pavlovian or something. I mean, it's like... So I live downtown in a rental apartment with my family, and on Easter, for example, we got on our bikes, and we went down Tom McCall, went over to Tillican, took the Orange Line as far as the infrastructure would take us. That's another issue, because I hope we build that bike infrastructure out further. Went through the neighborhoods, got to Crystal Spring, which is an amazing destination, then worked our way back through Eastmoreland, and then did some zigging and zagging, and then came back through the Orange Line infrastructure, and then ended up in the River District, then home. But what you've created, and some of these pictures illustrated along the Orange Line with the plantings, the infrastructure, the public art, I love the public art is just off the chart, and the way it integrates into the neighborhood is just extraordinary, and it's become every weekend our destination because it's a safe place to ride a bike, but it's also so beautiful, and it does feel of the place. So if some of that comes through the collaboration with the commission, then I would say that's a hugely successful collaboration.
Thank you. To extend that a little bit too, I made the comment earlier about the collaboration with the different bureaus. And in particular, this is where I can throw a bone, to the Bureau of Environmental Services, we've had extraordinary success in kind of, again, raising the bar on what we can do with stormwater treatments and with the landscaping along the streetscape. So we've had some very early tentative steps. The eco-track at the Lincoln Station was, again, that effort, that actually took an eco-roof technology and put it into a public street. So that is now our common benchmark, and we're looking to extend that and do more of that into the future. But those opportunities to innovate comes with the collaboration that we get to do with the Bureau of Development Services, PBOT, and the other ones too. So kudos to them.
Thank you.
If I might also add my thanks for your collaboration and admiration for the beauty of the designs. If there could, and I want to say this while you're here and the Design Commission, if the shelters could provide more shelter, that would be really helpful. They are lovely to look at, but there's only a couple of spots on them where you can stand and not get wet. And then when it's windy, it doesn't have all that much sideways protection either. So as we're continuing to refine our plans, thinking about that, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
You would like to?
Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Robinson. I'm the principal of Lever Architecture. I just first wanted to thank the Design Commission on behalf of our team for the award today. That was sort of a surprise, so it wasn't part of the thing. But one of the things I wanted to sort of address is we've been through design review a number of things, but instead of talking about design review, I wanted to talk about design as a whole, because design review is essentially about making sure that buildings are well designed. And I think that good design, whether it's public or private, whether it's housing, whether it's office, is about creating great experiences for everyone in the city. And good design is an expression of a democratic and open society. And I think if a project cannot get through this commission and be approved by the commission, it is not good design. And I think because we have probably one of the most experienced design review commissions I've ever experienced anywhere in the country, and we work nationally, and we have never had any issues getting our projects through design review. Actually, I think design review has improved our projects, and I think that if people focus on design and what good design is, this idea of an expression of our culture, that everyone deserves it, whether it's public housing or any of these other projects, it will be a benefit to our city. So I just wanted to say that and express my support for the work that the volunteers have done here.
Thank you and congratulations. It's a very impressive project.
Yeah, thank you.
Justifiably. Good afternoon.
Thank you. And for the record, my name is Teresa Rayford, and again, I'm a native Oregonian. And when it comes to design review, I want to focus on that really quick because that promotes accountability and effectiveness because of the process that it takes to build those committees that join together to have accountability and oversight for long-term goals of the entire project. So I want to go ahead and say kudos on what he said. I want to second that award. But at the same time, when we talk about livability for all in the design review and the whole process of including all people, one of the comments that Nick said about the poorest people, and then, this relativity with TriMet. As a person that has been marginalized in my community, in the hometown that I was born in, that my parents were born in, and my grandfather was born in, I've not been able to release myself of the marginalization, the criminalization, the perspective that my brown skin makes me poor. And so what we say in design review and building a culture of inclusivity, we have to acknowledge that, partnerships with bureaus that lead to like prisons that are partnered with TriMet and the increased criminalization of people that are in those communities, that as bureaus, you have to be very respectful to the longevity and the demarginalization of people that are using their voices and civic engagement to bring these issues to the table. Because in our communities, there's no one speaking to that. And so again, I want to commend the people that came up to this table before us because they're talking about doing a more diverse and more inclusive additional committee so that maybe they'll be able to bring in that type of prospectus. And so I think that on your end, as the city commissioners, that you have to have that type of lens and not be so quick to fund programs that incarcerate and isolate and criminalize. I think that the partnership that you have with TriMet, the design review in my mind, and what I could look at it for the next 20 years is additional children having their IDs removed from officers that are working in partnership with you. I can see more children coming to me for advocacy because they've been tased or handcuffed while riding TriMet, parents included, and then those same parents losing their children to foster care services and ankle bracelets because they got arrested together for not pulling out their ID in a timely fashion in areas that have been redesigned. And so to get that on the record is very important because I don't see anybody from any of those communities that represent social justice and the demarginalization of people of color here for this agenda item. But I think that is very important because as a state, we passed legislation to end profiling. And earlier today, in the first session, we were talking about funding housing for people that might be informants and working with the police to basically investigate people illegally. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony.
The next three are Cameron Stark, Kristen Calhoun, and Noel Johnson. And those are the last three who signed up.
Thank you.
Cameron's passing. Okay. Is there Kristen Calhoun or Noel? Oh, got it. Thank you. Noel, sorry.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Noel Johnson, and I'm a developer here in Portland, and I'm pleased to be here because it's an important subject. I want to first start just by acknowledging a few things, kind of echoing the previous developers here in terms of the huge volunteer civic commitment and like past and present members of the commission have made. I am unbelievably impressed by what professional caliber and sort of genuine focus and commitment is here. You've heard from the commission members here themselves, and I think that extends to all of them. I also think it's important to mention the trade-offs that we face in this discussion right here, because there is this dynamic where if you don't know what Portland was like before design review had its influence and really had the ability to prevent the bummer of buildings that so often do occur, you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm 38. I've developed over 20 institutional scale large projects, and that makes me somewhat weird, but I can tell you that the architects and engineers and developers that are my age or younger don't share and don't sort of have some of the context that the developers you've heard before me benefit from. So if we seek to emulate what some of those individuals have accomplished and try and keep the bar high, we also get very frustrated, and I think you're not hearing some of the concern or lack of frustration that they have as their projects go through the system. And what happens, in my concern, is that they're going to, without appreciating the benefits of the system, demand that the system be thrown away. So, the Goat Blocks is one project that I worked on with a great team, and we didn't put 200 additional units, even though it was allowed outright, on top of the grocery store that we were building. That's a bummer from housing affordability and/or supply standards and/or comprehensive 2035 standards. It took 19 hours of design review hearing. Undoubtedly, the project got better, but 19 hours over 303 days, which is a bit longer than a 120-day goal. Like, that has been really hard for me to explain the trade-offs to my peers in my age, and I sort of want to raise the red flag that we're all aware of that going forward as we seek to improve the system and make it better, because it is valuable. And so I just want to share that perspective.
Thank you, and that's an important perspective, and I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
So, Mayor, I move to accept the report.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Fish, a second by Commissioner Fritz. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Fish?
Well, first, thank you for an outstanding report. And I love this PowerPoint, and I've been struggling to figure out where all these buildings are located, but now I have some homework. I love the fact that you've chosen an affordable housing project with your first Design Excellence Award. And I especially love it because while Home Forward is one of the partners on this project, many years ago, Home Forward, then called Housing Authority of Portland, was thinking about a signature building in the same district. And at that time was toying with the idea of partnering with Frank Gehry, which I thought in concept was an okay idea, but it turned out it would have been the most expensive affordable housing development in the history of the world, and would not have been good for Home Forward's brand to do that. And so I think it's especially wonderful that you're honoring a building that is using innovative technology, keeping the costs down, and delivering a beautiful and cost-effective building without the glamour of some, international architect. I mean, not to say anything, a wonderful architect firm, but I thought the Gehry thing was a bit too much on the vanity side myself. And so the fact that it's affordable and beautiful is really wonderful. And I hope that sets the standard for other people doing affordable housing, because in my view, our value system should be very simple. We build train stations for people, and they're beautiful. We build libraries for people, and they're beautiful. We're going to spend a fortune to rebuild our high schools and our public schools to make them functional and beautiful. Where is it written that low-income people have to live in buildings that are not beautiful? And why should we ever subscribe to that as a values proposition? They're public resources. They should be built to last. They should be energy efficient and sustainable, and they should be beautiful. If I take one thing away from this hearing, and it's been reinforced in a couple of appeals we've had, it is that you need more resources. And I'll be interested to hear from the commissioner in charge whether that's a combination of staff resources and an expanded commission. But since we're going through an unprecedented building boom, it kind of almost felt, as you were describing it, it felt almost like, you know, what happens when the Senate doesn't fill judicial vacancies and you have a smaller number of judges doing twice the amount of work. That doesn't seem fair. And by the way, if people choose to opt out of the system because they're frustrated, I think the council is going to start sending a message that you got to go back and work with design review, because we don't want to be the opt-out with people that don't actually engage the process, and we can't set that precedent. So if we need more resources and more commissioners, I will look to the commissioner in charge to make that recommendation. But that, it would seem to me to make sense, at least for this period of unprecedented growth. It really is a wonderful presentation. I appreciate everyone who took time out to testify. And I'm proud of your work and pleased to support it. Aye.
Udaley.
I want to thank the Design Commission once again for their service to our city. I also want to thank the people who came here to testify today. It was especially nice to hear from local developers and architects speaking out in support of our Design Commission, because as is often the case, the detractors are often the loudest in the room. And it's gratifying to hear from people that have decades of experience with this process that they're supportive. I had a really hard time deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up, which is part of how I ended up here. But architecture and urban design is of special interest to me. My favorite comfort reading is A Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander. So I am thrilled to get to work with you, get to know you, and be involved in this process of improving, expanding our service to the city, as well as helping create better design commission customers or consumers. I think that's an important part of this as well. So thank you again, and it's an aye. So,
Fritz. Thank you, everybody who came today, and for this great presentation. Thank you very much to the Design Commission for all the work you put in, and David for your leadership. I don't remember having a vice chair coming in, spending his entire time saying how much he appreciates your leadership, and obviously heartfelt. So thank you on behalf of the council as well. One of the legacies of former director Paul Scarlett is in the Design Commission, reflecting the faces that are in our community. And I hope that if there is a second one, that a similar attention to be making sure that a broad spectrum of Portlanders get to serve on it will be paid by everyone. With Tim Herron still at the helm, I'm sure that will happen. So thank you very much for all of your work. I actually have found the appeals that we've had come into council fascinating, and always help me understand more about why we prefer to have you doing a lot of the hard work, because it's not my area of specialty, but it's certainly an area of interest. So thank you very much for this report. Aye.
Wheeler.
I'd like to thank everybody for bringing this forward, and Commissioner Udaley, I appreciate the good hard work you've done early on this, and this was a very timely report. I think it's important for us to hear the good things that are happening with regard to the design review process. I want to applaud the leadership and remind everybody it does not pay very well as a gig. And in many cases, it's thankless and it takes hours and hours. And I want to applaud all of you for your service. I want to be mindful of two things we heard during the public testimony, both of which I think are really important messages for us to hear. This is a good platform, and it's one that we can build from, and we heard former Chair Russell describe what he thought were some of the strengths and some of the evolution over the years. We heard current Design Review Commission members talking about some of the great architecture that's being built in the city and that's even being enhanced. We heard from some developers through this process, which I think is a great strength. But we can never be too confident in our own views of what community really is and who community is. And I know there's an effort on your part to try and diversify the design review process and be more receptive to voices that maybe have not historically been around the table when we're describing what the community's look, feel, and character is. And so that's an important statement that we have to keep front and center. The second one that I think I heard, and I don't want to misspeak, but I thought I heard a generational question being raised as well. By design, if I can use that word, the Design Review Commission has people at the top of their game who are illustrious and highly qualified professionals. And yet there's a lot of young people in this community who seek to follow in your footsteps. And they have a lot to learn and a lot to benefit from your experience. And I think there's an intergenerational sharing opportunity here. And one individual testified that maybe we aren't quite getting that sharing opportunity quite right. And therefore, it's manifesting itself as a bit of frustration. Like, what's with these guys? I'm trying to build a building, and they're asking all these pesky questions. I'm filling in the blanks. So maybe there's a real opportunity there, and I look forward to exploring that in a little more capacity, particularly as people in your field get to the end of their careers and, like you, say, I want to start giving back something to the community. I can never stress enough the intergenerational values, and sharing is so important to this young generation, as is the diversity question. Like everybody else, I look forward to any suggestions or thoughts or ideas that Commissioner Udaley has with regard to this process and working and collaborating with all of you. It'll be an interesting conversation in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Thank you. I vote aye, and the report is gratefully accepted on behalf of the City Council, Commissioner. Thank you. Just for the record, we had an item 382 we didn't finish this morning because we're late. Do you guys mind if I put it at the very end of the agenda? It's an HR issue.
I will be here.
Perfect, good. Next item, please.
Item 389, accept progress report regarding commitments with Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association for Mount Tabor Park reservoirs.
Commissioner Fish.
Thank you very much. We're going to invite forward four speakers. The Deputy Director.
Sure, Mayor, is your mic on?
We're going to invite forward four distinguished guests, the Deputy Director and the Principal Engineer of the Water Bureau, and Stephanie Stewart and John Larson from the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association. So if you could all come forward. Gabe, is it just you? Okay, there you go. So is Mary Ellen? Okay. So let me just tee this up as follows. Colleagues, following the decision to disconnect the Mount Tabor reservoirs from our drinking water system in 2015, Council passed a resolution committing the city to ongoing work to preserve the reservoirs. And I want to thank Commissioner Amanda Fritz for her genuine partnership in helping to reach that agreement. That resolution directed the Water Bureau to partner with the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association on planning and implementation and to present regular updates to Council. This is the first annual report to Council. We've had 6-month reports. And so I want to turn it over to our guests who will be presenting the report that's in your packet.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Gabrielle Salmer. I am the Deputy Director of the Water Bureau, and it is a true pleasure to be here with this particular group today to bring this report to you. I'm delighted to sit with this particular group of presenters, which would not have been feasible 2 years ago or 14 years ago, as you know. So I'm joined by Mary Ellen Collentine, our Principal Engineer, and John Larson to my right, and Stephanie Stewart of the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association.
And I want to apologize to Mary Ellen. My notes kept saying Teresa Elliott, and so I was having a psychic. I was trying to figure out how this was working. So we're joined by the Principal Engineer, but the Chief Engineer of the Water Bureau, if you can raise your hand, Teresa Elliott is in the back just to make sure we get it right.
Excellent. And I was going to introduce our distinguished guests, our Chief Engineer, Teresa Elliott, and our community representative, Terry Black, is also in the audience, who's done a great deal of work with the community on this project. And so I will leave it first to Mary Ellen to walk us through the report. It's not very long, but it is fairly detailed and goes through the history of this project, which is pretty fascinating. And then I'll have John and Stephanie go through a little bit about where we were and how we're moving forward. So Mary Ellen, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I also wanted to do an additional recognition of some other partners we've had with what I call our core team. We've had George Lazovoy from Parks Bureau, who's been integral in our meetings, along with two other neighborhood people, Bing Wong and Kim Lakin, and David Gray and Terry Black from the Portland Water Bureau. So that group comprises the core team. We have been diligently working together as a group for over a year now. We've been meeting monthly. We've also, some members of the Mount Tabor folks have also been meeting monthly with other Water Bureau folks with the Mount Tabor Disconnect Project. So we've been having a lot of communications, and I wanted to just touch briefly on a few highlights in the report. I don't want to take too much time because I think John and Stephanie's words are important to say today. So from a communication standpoint, I think we have been communicating very well. We have we've developed a really good working relationship, and we are continuing to develop a good working relationship. Sorry, this mic is sounding funny to me. Anyway, we've been working very well. We've been working together to try and develop or have a relationship where we can be honest and open and transparent with how we deal with each other, and I think we have achieved that. And I will let Stephanie and John confirm that in their testimony. I also should say that my remarks follow the points that were outlined in the resolution. So the first point in the resolution was communications. We've also been working for the last year on a water management plan. Part of the resolution said that we had to maintain 85% level of water in the reservoirs after they were disconnected. That poses a challenge for the Water Bureau. We've never dealt with managing non-potable water sources before. So for a year, we've done water quality testing. We've developed a draft water management plan to help us understand better how we're going to manage that water. We are hoping to solicit feedback from the neighborhood, our neighborhood partners within the next few weeks now that that draft plan has been put together. The plan is a work in progress. Because over this next year, we are going to be testing how well we can manage that water in order to maintain some level of water quality and to be sustainable in our practices. So how that works out over the next year is still yet to be determined, but we will be working with the Tabor folks and also with Environmental Services to make that happen. So from the standpoint of the Historic Preservation Project itself, we have done a significant amount of work over the last year. I know it's probably not apparent yet, but we started off with hiring the original author of our 2009 Historic Structures Report. We updated and amended the Historic Structures Report and developed a list of extremely high priority projects together with the neighborhood. We've also along with that, we've hired a historic preservation consultant. They just received notice to proceed, and so we are chomping at the bit to get going with design work and to get projects out the door. We've also moving forward with replacing the chain link fence that protects the dam face between Reservoir 5 and Reservoir 6. This was put up in the 90s and has certainly been a source of irritation for the neighborhood out there because it is not historically compatible with the reservoir historic features. we are moving forward with getting that out to bid in the next couple months, and we'll be replacing that fence with something that's more historically compatible. I want to touch a little bit on our budget. We had requested and received a budget last year, and we were only going to spend about a third of that budget, and we've requested carryover. For this coming fiscal year, we've requested about $1 million because between the carryover and the request for this coming fiscal year, we would be able to carry out the first list of the top priority projects, which is about $1.3 million. We know that there have been questions about why we have not expended all of the funds from this fiscal year, and I just want to say that we've been working really hard to do the planning level effort necessary to get to where we are today, to where we can, get a design professional on board and start putting bid packages together. So. Although it may not look like we've been doing much, we've actually been working hard and done a lot of preparatory work to get to this point. We have a lot of momentum. So we're hoping that our funding request will be approved and that we can continue with doing the projects that we have been working on. And I thank you very much for allowing us to come to you today, and I'm going to turn it over to John and Stephanie.
So, yes, thank you. Thank you all for allowing us to be here today. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and the commissioners, for your time. We're actually really happy to be here to be able to tell you about the productive partnership we've built between the community and the Bureau over the last 21 months. We're proud to be able to tell you that we've poured hundreds of hours of great work into this project. And we're also here to celebrate the fact that with the council's leadership, and thanks to the determination and diligence of those of us sitting at this table together with many others, we really have succeeded in taking what was a bitter legal confrontation between the community and the Water Bureau from that very contentious point and building what is now a very good and positive and, in fact, rewarding relationship. And finally, we're pleased to be able to come before you in person to tell you about the enormous momentum that we've built together. After more than a year and a half of deliberate and methodical preparation, this partnership between the community and the Water Bureau is now poised to launch a well-considered and fiscally prudent suite of carefully planned projects. It took 14 long years to get to this point where we're all sitting at this table together. And while we won't retell that saga, I'm sure Commissioner Fish is happy that we don't want to go into that.
We all have scars.
We all have scars. But we do want to provide some context for the written report that you have before you today. This report is the second written report we've made to the council, and it takes you through the last 12 months of our activities and the resulting work products. And 2 years ago, just about exactly 2 years ago, the Water Bureau and the community were at loggerheads over the future of the Mount Tabor reservoirs, and we were caught in a legal battle that no one wanted, but that no one seemed able to avoid. And we were on the brink of that legal battle, continuing on to LUBA and perhaps beyond. Then, at your request, at the request of many members of the City Council, a small handful of us, Teresa Elliott and David Schaff, and Stephanie and myself and a few other members of our community sat down together to talk. And after a long and arduous and stressful negotiation, and to everyone's surprise, including our own, we succeeded in hammering out a compromise solution, the solution that is embodied in Council Resolution 37146. And that solution, as you know, was definitely a compromise. By no stretch of the imagination did the community get everything it wanted, nor did the Bureau get everything it wanted, but we had found a path to avoid continuing litigation and to an exit strategy from that difficult situation, and a path that we sincerely hoped would work for both the Bureau and the community going forward. But that solution required that everyone on both sides of this take a leap of faith to trust the agreement that we had reached, and it required that we all set out on that path in a spirit of goodwill. And the fact is that we all did that. We looked past our historical animosity and we suspended our skepticism, and we worked very hard to work together. It has not always been easy, but we have been far more successful than I think we anticipated, or frankly, than council anticipated. We talk about this a lot. It's evidence, we think, for what can be accomplished to heal this kind of a rift between a city bureau and members of the community when people sit down in a spirit of goodwill to talk with each other instead of talking past each other. And I will say that we built in these reports when we were negotiating the solution. We and the Water Bureau leaders built in these reports because we thought it would be a way of coming back to a neutral arbitrator if we were struggling with each other. And that's manifestly not the case. We actually have built a very good working relationship. And we particularly want to thank you, Commissioner Fish, and you, Commissioner Fritz, for your leadership on this situation and for your trust in us and for all of your support in helping to make this process possible.
John, that's very, I'll get it soon. That's very kind of you to say, and I just want to, because we have two new members, I want to acknowledge that we invited Commissioner Fritz to come into this conversation, and she could have said no. She had a million other things on her plate, but we felt her partnership was necessary, and I think of the number of things that ended up coming together to help us get to this point, I think Amanda agreeing to step into the controversy and partner with the Water Bureau was crucial, as was what you described, I think, which was your willingness to sit down and do the face-to-face negotiations with the Bureau without people there to monitor it and to see if you could reach a deal. And those were two parts of the process which I learned a lot from. So but I want to acknowledge that Amanda's participation, in my view, was crucial.
Absolutely. We would say the same. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
Hello. So 21 months ago, we came to council and presented you with an elegant solution to what seemed to all of us to be an intractable problem. Our solution did not involve a costly redesign of the site. It did meet the requirements imposed by multiple levels of local, state, and federal regulations for historic resources, and it dealt with that shared responsibility we all have to care for publicly owned historic resources and public spaces. That solution recognized that the Water Bureau must continue to own this site because the pipes beneath it are essential to the drinking water system. It honored the city policy that capital assets must be maintained, and we want to be clear about this last point. It's the most cost-effective solution for achieving all of the above. You applauded that solution, and you sent us away with the charge to keep working to make more solutions and to keep this solution viable. And we've taken that charge seriously, garnering from other people and investing ourselves literally hundreds of hours of free labor. We too, John and myself, volunteer in our community because we value public service and civic engagement. And we are here working on this specific issue, as we have been for years, because protecting a park benefits a wide cross-section of Portlanders. But we are also participants in a long history of civic engagement in which residents of all the neighborhoods around Mount Tabor have worked to secure that space as a park to benefit all Portlanders. As you move into budget season, we hope you will support the momentum we've developed and help us build upon it. Postponing the funding would mean getting less value for the dollars spent. Postponing the funding would be devastating given the logistics of construction contracting. Postponing the funding would damage the trust we've built with our constituents. And we hope that your acceptance of this report signals your continuing support of this hard-won partnership between the public and the Bureau. And thanks for having us today.
Thank you. Any further questions for this panel? Is there any public testimony, Carla?
No one signed up.
Very good.
So I'm going to, why don't you stay here? I'm going to move to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll.
Fish.
I got it right this time, so just. Thank you for the report. And this is a joint report. It's not written by either party. It's jointly submitted. And I appreciate that. Thank you, John and Stephanie, for the history lesson and also for your gracious comments about the state of the relationship. Because that means a lot to the people who I have the honor of working with, that we have developed such a strong partnership. And this was intended to be a place where if things were getting off track, you would tell us. So that is, I agree with you, that is the value of this forum. I feel very strongly that we have to honor the commitment we made. If one were to look at this in the abstract, one might reach one conclusion, but having lived through the history and understanding how much effort went into this, what kind of compromise this represented, and how important it was in terms of securing broad support for this path forward, I think we must honor the commitment we've made. And so that's my commitment as a commissioner. But we greatly appreciate the partnership, look forward to future reports, and we especially look forward to when the work is completed. And we have restored the historical integrity of beautiful reservoirs, and that it becomes a place where future generations come with some pride and look back on an important chapter in our history. Thank you both. Thanks to the team. Aye.
Udaley?
Thank you for the report. As you know, this whole ordeal predates my arrival on council, and I'm going to go back and read Council Resolution number 37146 just to give myself a little more grounding. I'm happy to hear that it was the most cost-effective solution because, as you can imagine, we have a lot of competing priorities in the budget this year and every year. Aye.
Sorry. Fritz.
Thank you very much for this report. Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Fish. I think your version is not exactly how I remember it. And we got to the right decision in the end. And actually, to disagree with something you said, Mr. Larson, I was not surprised. At least I wrote down I was not surprised because I had trust that the process, the neighbourhoods, the good people at the Water Bureau, that when we were able to get you to talk to each other, that you would come up with a solution. What I was surprised by is when you had that solution at the land use appeal hearing, because there had been a lot of concern that as judges in that decision, we should not know ahead of time what the Bureau and the neighbourhoods had been doing. So I think it was one of the most stunning moments at council for me when you came together and said, here's the plan and this is the agreement. We had the accompanying resolution about how we were going to take care of the neighbourhoods concerned about the reservoirs. And that was fabulous. It's one of the times, Commissioner, that I've particularly appreciated your leadership and service on the council. The other one, I would have to say, being in my first term, your first full term, which was when you and I saved the ratepayers $500 million by persuading Commissioner Leonard not to build a filtration system in the Bull Run watershed. And that too was a quite momentous vote, which I shall cherish always. And indeed, I gave you the Spirit of Portland Award jointly, the Water Bureau and the Mount Tabor Neighbourhood Association in 2015 in recognition that you had done the hard work. And I'm really happy to hear that you're continuing to be able to set a shining example. It would be a breach of good faith of the worst kind if the council doesn't continue to fund this. We did leave it open as to whether it should be rates or whether it should be general funds, so that at some point in the future we might take a look at that. I'm committed this budget cycle that the funding that's been requested to continue the good work should come out of the general fund, and I will definitely support it with every breath I take. Thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for saying that you would look up the resolution. I almost would like to go back and look at the video because I'm sure my jaw dropped practically to the ground when you came in with the solution. It was fabulous. So thank you. It's good to know that we can trust our bureaus to do good things. We can trust our community to do good things. We can trust our neighbourhood associations to be inclusive, to work for the good of everybody, and to speak up when some other people can't. So thank you. Aye.
Wheeler.
Hard work, great resolution. I just want to put a quick asterisk. By accepting the report, I am not accepting the budget request. That being said, I'm hearing what my fellow commissioners who fought this battle alongside of you have said, and the word of prior councils does mean something to me, and so we'll work hard to make it work in the context of the budget. But I want to be clear, accepting the report for me is never an acceptance of any budget obligation. That's sort of my blanket statement. Thank you for your hard work on this, your volunteer hours. Commissioner Fish never ceases to amaze me with his diplomatic skills. It seems to run in his family. And
Mayor, let's be clear. My diplomacy in this case was to get out of the diplomacy. It was uniquely a deal struck by Bureau leadership and by community leadership, and that's probably why it came together.
a great general once said, know which battles to fight and know which ones to run from, and the second is probably the more important. Commissioner Fritz, why you would agree to jump into this is beyond me, but I'm glad you did. And it sounds like between you and Commissioner Fish, you were able to work very, very closely with the neighborhood organizations and hammer out a really great solution. So kudos to all of you for doing something really, really positive. Obviously, I'll vote aye, and the report's accepted. Thank you.
And Mayor, just as a point of information, Commissioner Saltzman also supported the measure, so I'm
Very
hopeful
good.
that...
Yes,
we'll-
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks. The next item.
And our final item.
Well,
No, second
possibly.
final.
We'll see. We had to poll. We didn't get to one item this morning.
So it's our penultimate item.
It is the penultimate item. A word
Item-
often misused in the English language, but you got it right.
Item 390, appeal of residents of the 937 condominiums against the noise variance granted to Bremick Construction to conduct 6-day-long concrete pours with early morning setup for the hotel construction project located at 485 Northwest 9th Avenue.
It's my understanding that Paul Van Orden is, oh, there's Paul, right in front. Greetings, sir. If you want to kick us off, and then I've got the run of show here.
PowerPoint open up. Let me just see where it's at.
Why don't I let people know just what the run of show is while Paul's getting that set up. So we'll hear, this is a formal hearings process. So we'll hear from the appellant for 10 minutes. We'll hear from supporters of the appellant for 2 minutes each. There is a sign-up sheet at the council clerk's desk. We will then hear from the principal opponent of the appeal. That's Paul, the noise control officer. That is a 15-minute segment. Other opponents of the appeal then have 2 minutes each. And again, you can sign up with Carla at the clerk's office. And then we have the appellant rebuttal after that for 5 minutes, then council discussion as needed. And I just want to be very clear for people, these are not arbitrary time limits that I am establishing. These are time limits that are established in code for formal hearings like this. So with that, Mr. Van Orden.
Thank you. Members of City Council, my name is Officer Paul Van.
Paul, you need to just press the button.
Sorry about that. Members of City Council, my name is Officer Paul Van Orden. I'm the noise control officer for the City of Portland. Today, we have an appeal of a construction noise variance from citizen Dave Mitchell and 22 members of the 937 condos at 937 Northwest Gleason. 2 of the people listed on the original appeal have contacted the city and have asked to be removed from the appeal after researching the specifics of the approved noise variance. These 2 folks are Miguel Fernandez and Alexander Wilmerding, and I handed an email to the council clerk just for the record. The construction noise variance appeal today, and the flow of it has been laid out by the mayor. I was going to clarify that. The variance is being appealed today the variance being appealed today relates to a construction project by Bremick Construction. After initially issuing a noise variance for a single concrete pour at 485 Northwest 9th to occur back in October of 2016, the contractor, Bremick Construction, misinterpreted the bounds of that variance and performed a concrete pour on March 16th, 2017. A new applicant from Bremick Construction had thought that they were covered under their existing noise variance and misinterpreted the variance and performed a pour on that date. The noise office responded to a concern from citizens, in particular one citizen, regarding the early morning pour on that morning, and cited the construction company for that particular infraction. After the initial variance work occurred at that address, the noise office was able to have a meeting with Bremick on Wednesday, March 22nd, about a week later, and met to discuss the parameters of their project at this location, and came to an understanding of where the misinterpretation by the employee was in requesting a noise variance and misunderstanding that it was just for one date and was not for all the dates that they required for this particular project. And as we sat down and discussed the upcoming pours for the location, there were many pours on the plate, but there were 6 particular pours that clearly were going to operate for more than the allotted time in the city code for allowed construction activities. After meeting with the contractor, variance changes were submitted, and re-notification to all neighbors within 2 blocks was required under a modified noise variance or a revised noise variance, along with the requirement to set up an email notification to any neighbors who wanted to specifically have regular details on the project and not just the overarching details of the variance. City Council has received materials, including a few emails and a copy of the revised variance to which Mr. Mitchell and his neighbors have based their appeal. I'll now step you through a little bit of background on the noise variance process and leave my further explanation of the concrete pouring processes and our variances for my 15 minutes after the principal opponent speaks. And so, not sure how I just hit start. Sorry, I'm a Mac guy. My apologies. There it is.
Carla, what would we do without you?
We're not there yet. I don't
We would get nothing done.
There you go.
Ah, there it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My apologies.
No worries.
Just for the record, the noise variance that we are speaking to today is 388951, and -001 denotes that it is a revised variance, not the first variance. The noise code for the city of Portland has delineated 2 different concepts for construction in the city of Portland. There are allowed construction hours in the city of Portland which occur from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Those are Monday through Saturday, and those allow construction companies the greatest flexibility in making noise up to 85 decibels during those hours. There is also a concept that is sometimes lost and confusing, which is that outside of those construction hours for the city of Portland, you are able to operate and do construction, but you must meet the baseline standards for the city's noise code. And so those vary radically based on the specific land use and zoning pattern of a given neighborhood. But for the Pearl District where we are talking about today, we have an almost ubiquitous zoning type that winds up translating into an industrial zoning for the noise code, which translates into 75 decibels normally at a neighboring property. When a complaint has been received daytime, that standard drops down to 70, and then after 10 p.m., that standard drops down additionally to 65. The second component in terms of background on noise variances is that the noise variance process for the city of Portland has 2 delineating layers. Larger projects like the rehabilitation of the Hawthorne Bridge or the Selwood Bridge are large projects that come before the city's noise review board. Complex projects come before the Noise Review Board. Large outdoor events in Waterfront Park that do not have a history with the city, like the Pabst Blue Ribbon that has happened in the past, or the Northwest Music Fest, until they build a history that they can comply, they will appear before the Noise Review Board. Those are a small number of the variances we process annually. So in fiscal year 15-16, we processed 603 variances in the city. 96 of those were for construction-related work. And of those variances, 9 were Noise Review Board-related construction variances, just as a little bit of background on our variance system.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because I'm living in a rental apartment now in the middle of a lot of construction, and I have a slightly different view of this issue now because of its impact on just our quality of life. And would you remind us, what's the reasoning behind allowing for one of the weekend days to exceed the noise levels, the Saturday 7 to 6? Because essentially for us, what that does is it constructively evicts us from our apartment on Saturdays. And remind me what the thinking is on that?
So I hopefully am not going to be too off on the history, but when the noise code was written back in the early 70s by my predecessor, Dr. Paul Herman, and the folks who worked on it, the concept was that was an accepted practice at that time, and the city was much smaller, so you have to remember that at that point we were not seeing as many projects occurring onto Saturdays or occurring late into the evening. So the concept that was delineated in the city code was recognizing 6 days of construction, and as you may recall from some of our dialogues over the last few years, many cities are allowing 7 days of construction. So at that point, I can't say what the pattern was in the United States, but we are definitely still ahead of the curve in terms of limitations on construction work in the city, or in cities in the United States. But the thought process back then, I think, was that it wasn't an encumbrance on the community, primarily because the number of projects that are occurring into a Saturday are limited. Our patterns have clearly changed.
And this is not the time and the place to address that, but I would like to follow up with you on this question and whether what the pluses and minuses are today in our current context with cranes on every corner of allowing Saturday construction, and also whether the hours of 7 to 6 still make sense. I actually think there's a big difference whether it was moved to, say, 9 o'clock so you got a decent night's sleep rather than being woken up early for construction. But I'd like to get your thoughts outside this forum.
Okay, beautiful.
And I should just clarify, questions from the council, when there's questions, Carla stops the clock. So it's not taking away from appellant or opponent time. I just want to be very clear about that.
And I think that we lost a minute when the technical hitch.
To jump into the actual process of reviewing noise variances, within City Code, Title 1814.020 delineates that variances, Section D, the review of an application and its merit shall include consideration of at least the following. 1, the physical characteristics, times, and durations of the emitted sound. 2, the geography, zone, and population density of the affected area. 3, whether the public health, safety, and welfare is impacted. 4, whether the sound source predates the receivers, meaning the residential neighbors. And 5, whether compliance with the standard or provisions from which the variance is sought would produce hardship without equal or greater benefit to the public. And finally, 6, an applicant's previous history, if any, of compliance or noncompliance. And so in this particular case, all of those measures were looked at. What I wanted to just outline before I walk through a concrete pour in my 15 minutes is just a little bit of background on the unique challenges that we face with concrete pours in the city of Portland. The duration of setup time, actual concrete pouring, and the finish time to finish the concrete can often well exceed the 11 hours within the city code to operate from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we have to be sensitive of that concern. We have had a very unusual year this year with weather, between the snow impacting the construction industry and one of the wettest Marches on record. So weather issues with precipitation, including snow, impact the ability to schedule pours. Transportation challenges, such as some of the requirements with light rail alignments, or in cases where we have limited access, can impact how we're going to operate a particular concrete pour. The availability of concrete product in such a giant construction boom, the availability of people who actually finish the concrete, and the availability of specialized equipment such as the pump trucks, can play a big factor in the process. And finally, just as a note, although this was not the factor in this particular part of the variance, the initial pours, hot weather limitations do play an impact on the projects because of cure times and also the sensitivity of trying to get the project done so workers are not out in an entire day of hot weather, potentially facing heat stroke issues. So we also take that into consideration. And so I want to leave my actual explanation of an average concrete pour for my 15 minutes, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned to council for part of this process. I want to ask council to please take a tentative vote today to guide staff in preparing a written order for council's adoption at the next meeting of the direction you'd like to offer us. I ask that you continue the matter next week for a final vote, and we'll circulate a draft of the order consistent with your tentative vote for council, and to the appellant. So I just wanted to mention that and give the appellant an opportunity to present their case.
May I ask a question?
Please.
You mentioned about concrete finishing. What is that?
After they've actually poured the concrete, they can't just walk away from it. They actually have to put a finish on it, and there are several machines they use. You may have seen on large construction sites, it almost looks like a hovercraft that they sit on, and they basically move around and make sure there's a consistent finish. It is not a quiet operation, but is definitely quieter than some of the other components of the construction operation. So that is the final phase after all the concrete is actually poured, especially on flat deck situations that we're talking about, not the columns and not the facade walls.
So if that happens before the concrete is set or after the concrete is set?
Well, I guess technically, I will let Remick tell me if I'm wrong in this, but the concrete is still curing, so at that point, it's hard enough to do the finish work, but it hasn't fully formed to the point where it's, a finished product. So some of it is happening as they're actually pouring, they're starting to work on the finishing element, and then after you see a fully poured slab, let's say, or a deck, then they're working to get that nice finish. And in this case, I believe this is a building that will rely on the final product to be the actual product that people walk on, so they have to be extra sensitive of the finishing approach.
So what I'm hearing is that the whole process takes longer than, they couldn't start later in the day if they were going to be able to finish it the same day, is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The option of starting later doesn't work because the whole process takes longer than a business day, is that correct?
That's part of the factor. Part of the other issue is the supply of concrete is an industry standard that they focus on primarily supplying early in the day. So one of the concepts on the table for council is if we're looking to require folks to pour and go late into the evening, then we need to work to make sure the noise office is in a comfortable position to require an industry that is historically focused on supply at the early end of the day, because they're getting the concrete poured, and then the finish point is when they're no longer having concrete trucks come in.
Thank you.
Could I ask a clarifying question? I just want to make sure I understand this. So they're asking for 6 days.
Yes.
To extend the current time limits.
Yes, and
for this reason that Commissioner Fritz just laid out.
And to ensure in the particular pours that I'll lay out in my 15 minutes, they are under the gun on an average project to finish in that timeline. If they run into any challenges, it gets to be an even longer time frame, such as a pump truck gets clogged.
Okay, and I understand that. Then I'm sure they'll tell us some other challenges as well. But at the core, what you're asking this council to arbitrate is whether or not we should give them those 6 days a variance to the current noise codes.
Yes.
Is that what you're asking us for?
Yes, that's correct.
Are those 6 days in a row, or 6 days total over some period of time?
They're over an extended period, but they seem to be operating fairly consistently. Within about a week and a half, 2 weeks, they get a deck finished, and they're starting on the next use of the noise variance.
Okay, and this is coming to council because these always come to council, or is this coming to council because you haven't been able to reach an agreement, or why is this coming to council?
The construct, and I may be off on this, and the city attorney may need to clarify, but since the noise variance process is a quasi-judicial process, when the noise control officer or the noise review board make a determination the community has a right to appeal that determination. And so we don't see many construction noise variance appeals, but members of the council who've been here for a little while may recall that now that we're becoming an actual city and we have density, we're starting to see more of these. So
Okay.
that's the reason for us to be before
Okay,
council.
so they're going to ask us for an appeal, and then you're going to talk for 15 minutes on why you don't think we should agree to that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. So I won't interrupt, and I'll let people get about their business.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, it looks like David Mitchell, representing the 937 condos, and Mary Sipe from the Livability and Safety Committee of the Pearl District, assuming I got that correct?
You got it correct.
Very good. And according to this, you have 10 minutes to use however you'd like. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You have to hit the
My name is
green, the
David
button on your microphone there, on the plate there.
It is on now, is that?
It needs to light up green.
Is it green?
It's green.
Is it green? Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, yours is blue.
Oh, there you go, okay.
Great, thank you.
For the third time, my name is Dave Mitchell.
Still David.
And my wife and I have been residents of the Pearl District since moving to Portland from San Diego some 8 years ago. Although I still work part-time, most of my days are spent as a volunteer with various community organizations. I firmly believe that the most effective way to influence the quality of life of one's community is to be actively engaged in helping shape events and outcomes, not simply by being a silent spectator. In support of this belief, I serve on the board of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. I chair the Neighborhood Association's Livability and Safety Committee. I serve on its Emergency Preparedness Committee. I put on my yellow vest with the Pearl District Foot Patrol and go out every 2 weeks. I serve on the board of the nonprofit Friendly Streets organization. I'm on our condos HOA board, and I'm a member of the Leadership Council of PSU's Senior Adult Learning Center. I mention these involvements only to convey to you that I'm not some cranky old guy in the Pearl who's here to waste your time on some self-serving bone to pick. Today, I hope to seek your help in maintaining an appropriate balance between the city's economic interests and the livability concerns of the 8,000 plus people, including my wife and myself, who make the Pearl District our home. As anyone who lives in our neighborhood knows all too well, the exceptional level of construction activity in our neighborhood is absolutely without precedent in the city's history, with more than 20 high-rise buildings now in the pipeline, 20 in less than 1/2 a square mile. At the risk of understatement, the impact of all these projects going on simultaneously has truly tested the patience of all of us who live in the Pearl. We endure daily doses of early morning equipment deliveries, dust, diesel fumes, truck traffic, jackhammering, pile driving on certain projects, and sidewalk and street closures that go on for as long as 18 months per project. To get right to the point, I'm here as a representative of 22 fellow residents of the 937 condo building that's located directly across Northwest Gleason Street from the site of the Canopy by Hilton boutique hotel that's been under construction since early last summer. We who have signed this appeal to the noise variance readily acknowledge that we live in Portland's most densely populated area, and we recognize that these intrusions are a natural byproduct of intense real estate development. We're all quite willing to accept this state of affairs, but only on the condition that the laws and ordinances that govern construction activity are properly and consistently enforced. However, there are occasions when lapses occur and exceptions are made in this enforcement, the result being disruptions that exceed what most thoughtful people would consider reasonable. Our appeal, which is described in the letter to you and the accompanying documents, concerns just such an untenable intrusion. Half of the units in our building, 57 to be exact, face the Canopy construction site, and only 55 feet separate our building from the Canopy structure. Despite a few glitches, the Bremick Construction Company has done an exemplary job of notifying us and other residential buildings as to what can be expected at their project in the next week or two. So to be clear, our issue is not with Bremick, but rather with a specific decision made recently by the city's noise control office. As background, on Thursday, March 16th, I was suddenly awakened at 5:15 a.m. when Bremick began an extremely loud concrete pour without notifying residents such as us in the 937 building in advance, as they had promised to do from the get-go, and as they had on previous occasions when there would be unusual things occurring. I complained immediately in an email to Josh Ring, our condos contact at Bremick, and I emailed Paul Van Orden at 7 a.m. about this unannounced intrusion. Paul got right back to me with a 9:30 email. He asked me to provide details on the early morning pour, which I immediately did in an email that I got back to him at 11 o'clock. The following afternoon, Paul sent me an email confirming that Bremick, in fact, did not have a waiver to conduct a pour before 7, and he encouraged me to complete the paperwork necessary to issue Bremick a citation. Paul's email message to me also included the statement, quote, "I am not looking to add more pours before 7 a.m. at this point," unquote. Paul then called me on the phone to iterate that it was not appropriate for contractors to conduct concrete pours before 7 a.m., and he again encouraged me to file the paperwork necessary to issue Bremick a citation, which I did over the following weekend. I assumed this matter was closed. But then I and other residents of the 93 Condos building received an email message from Josh Ring at Bremick on March 26th, which informed us that the Noise Control Office had just granted Bremick a waiver on March 23rd to engage in 6 concrete pours, 2 pours that could begin as early as 4 a.m., and 4 pours that could begin as early as 5 a.m. Needless to say, I was astounded at the Noise Control Office's reversal of what Paul had told me less than a week earlier. I immediately emailed him expressing my dismay at his office's 180-degree reversal. He then emailed me back to report that he had granted the noise waiver after a private meeting with unnamed representatives from Bremick. I then emailed Paul later that same day expressing my serious objection to this waiver, and I told him I intended to submit an appeal to his office decision, which I proceeded to do with 22 other signatories to this appeal. In our view, this noise variance represents an unreasonable concession to Bremick, which comes directly at the expense of the right of many hundreds of people living within a block and a half of this construction site to simply be able to sleep until a normal wake-up time. The bottom line is that we have no quibble whatsoever with Bremick's right to conduct concrete pours beginning at the legal start time of 7 a.m. 6 days a week, which they did this last Saturday, although they started earlier. All we ask is that the regular hours of construction be adhered to and not modified to suit the logistical needs and challenges of the contractor. We respectfully request that you overturn this variance, thereby requiring that Bremick conform to the regular allowed hours of operation in its remaining 4 concrete pours. Thanks very much for taking the time to hear our position on this matter. And I now would like to ask Mary Sipe, who chairs our noise subgroup of the Livability Committee on our PDNA, for her comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I guess I only have 3 minutes. I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit. First of all, let's be clear that the normal hours are from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. That gives an 11-hour window to start and complete this project. And what we're talking about is starts before 7 a.m. With the construction of the many high-rise buildings in the Pearl District, one of the loudest and most disruptive activities are these concrete pours. There will be as many as 8 concrete trucks sometimes on site, as well as 2 big pump trucks. It sounds like a jet runway. In addition to the noise, the lights on the tower crane come on at 4 o'clock in the morning and shine into the people's bedroom windows. So if you're not awakened by the noise, you will be awakened by the lights shining in your bedroom. I gave you each some packets of information, and in your packet, you'll have a map. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of this map, you'll see where this project is located. And you'll also see the number of projects in our neighborhood that are literally surrounded by construction activities. I also gave you a list that I created giving the number of units in all of the buildings in the Pearl District area where we live. And that will give you some idea of the number of residents who are impacted by just this one project. And I highlighted in yellow the 2 buildings that are closest to this project. We're talking over 300 people. When you look at this permit as a standalone single event, it might not seem very significant. However, if you look at the number of projects and the number of residents that are impacted, it is a very significant event. When you also consider that on April 7th, there was a noise variance permit granted just a block away for overnight road work from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. the following morning. So when are people supposed to sleep? In addition to the permit that's being appealed, Bremick has been granted 2 other permits, giving them 4 a.m. concrete pours, 10 each on 2 other projects. In your packet are a number of, you'll see, a whole bunch of noise variance permits from various companies for 4 a.m. or for 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. starts. So if Bremick, I mean, if these other companies can start at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., why does Bremick have to start at 4? I'm running out of time here. Let me see what else I want to say before we give our rebuttal. Essentially, what we're asking you to do is, these pours are not taking the 13 hours. They're not even taking 11 hours. What we're asking is no more 4 a.m., no more Saturdays. Have them start at 7 and go until 8.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may.
Please.
Could you tell me a bit more about the nature of the noises? You said it's like a jet runway.
Yeah. Have you ever stood near a concrete truck with its thing spinning?
Yeah.
Okay, 8 of those sometimes are on site. And then, in addition to that, there's these 2. In fact, I have some photos at the very back of your, it's not a very good one, but at the very back, last 2 pictures in your packet.
Mm-hmm.
The first one with all the blue lines on it, that's when they started on Saturday morning. And you will see in front of those 2, there's 2 concrete trucks, the yellow ones, and in front of it is the pump. And sometimes they have 2 pumps going on these. The second photo is at 3 o'clock that afternoon. The spreaders and the finishers were gone. They were loading up their equipment and leaving when I arrived at 3 o'clock.
So part of your contention is that it doesn't take over 11
A lot
hours.
of it depends upon how many yards of concrete they're going to pour. You know, not every job. And when we have, you know, I have a number of examples. I've observed over 20 buildings and concrete pours on them in the last 17 years outside my window and around the neighborhood. And, you know, it's the exception, not the norm, that I've observed. And I will, when we have our chance for rebuttal, I have some examples that I can give you, and I can also give you copies of the details that I have.
Thank you, this is very helpful.
I can only liken the noise to a garbage truck when it's compressing all of the trash, which usually goes on for 15 or 20 seconds. You extrapolate that over 8 hours. That's what it sounds like.
Thank you.
And I also did take some noise meter readings on Saturday, and they were around 90 decibels, about across the street from the project. So that'll also give you some idea.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, supporters of the appellant, 2 minutes each.
Okay, I'm sorry, I only had one sign-up sheet.
Very good.
A couple I'm pretty sure where you're at, but Scott Schaefer, are you, this is for supporting the appeal. Is this the one you want to? Okay, what about Melissa Stewart on the Noise Review Board? Are you supporting?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll call you next. So Desi Wright, if you support the appeal? Okay, wrong list. What about Carrie Stanley? You're probably, okay, thank you. And I'm sure Josh Ring is with Bremick, so, okay. It looks like we don't have any other supporters of the appeal here.
Okay, very good. It's not necessary. Next is the principal opponent of the appeal. That would be the noise control officer. You have 15 minutes.
So Paul, can I jump in for a second?
Yes.
Because we have a lot of regard for the work you do, and you make lots of presentations to council. So there's a couple of things I just want to make sure I understand. What is the principal rationale for extending the hours? Is it cost? Is it convenience? Is it ultimately to reduce inconvenience by expanding it? How would you describe the principal public benefit here of expanding those hours?
Well, that is a little bit challenging because the layers of factors in making the determination, but I would say the overarching element is getting the project done so it's not dragging on for an extended period, and balancing that out by being realistic when we have an element such as these pours that may not realistically be able to happen in just 11 hours.
And so just, I'm going to give you an analogy. When we do some work in neighborhoods where we rip up the roads and replace pipes for the Water Bureau and BES, we'll sometimes ask people, would you like us to work in the evenings if it means a shorter construction cycle, or do you want us to go in the normal cycle and spread the disruption over? So we give people a voice in that. And there's trade-offs, but generally we try to take the temperature of the community. In an instance like this, what's the proper measurement of, who do we measure the community will on that for purposes of deciding whether the inconvenience to people of having longer pours is outweighed by the benefit of maybe a shorter construction schedule?
That's a hard answer, but I think part of the challenge is when you're looking at all of the work that's happening in the Pearl, there is so much work going on that trying to figure out how we minimize the number of days that we're doing this is definitely the primary motive on the table. And in this particular location, looking at 6 mornings, early mornings of work was deemed a reasonable factor for the size of this project, and also just looking at the mitigating circumstance that I'm really not in an easy position to force them to do it at night relative to the safety factors, the supply factors, the weather. And that's why, I mean, if you look at this particular variance, I offered 2 dates to start early, not 6 dates. Looking at all the challenges they've been facing with weather, they are literally sometimes scheduling things within a day based on the weather for that individual day. It's that complex. It's literally down to sometimes only a few days out. They're notifying neighbors, so it's not the greatest situation for us to approve it in terms of trying to balance everything.
And one last question, and sorry to cut it, it was not cutting into your time, but did the Pearl District Neighborhood Association formally take a position?
I am not aware of them formally taking a position. I checked with one of their representatives. We might have to check with the appellants if they feel that they have a sign-off from the Pearl District that they're on the
Okay,
appeal.
I guess one other question, if I could. Is this, you come to us with lots of interesting kind of livability issues. In your judgment, is our decision on this more art or more science?
It's a little bit of both. I think I would actually say it's more art in the sense because it is hard to say unequivocally that there are not health impacts to approving these operations.
So this is uniquely one where it's within our good judgment to try to make our decision.
Yes, aside from the duration of the pour and the factors of why they start early in terms of the supply, the equipment availability. Yeah. So I want to take a moment and just walk council through 2 pours relative to Bremick. One is the one on the 16th when they had an infraction with the city and received a citation, and the one that I will start with was a recent one on March 30th. And so you will see in this photo from the construction site that there is a pumper truck that may be hard to see right in the center of the picture in the street with a green line going down, which is the actual mechanism for pumping. And it is arriving and getting ready to set up at 4:11 a.m. Concrete trucks are already starting to offload material at 5:11. You can see 2 trucks backed up to the pumper, and they are already in operation or offloading and getting the pumper ready to start spreading the material. And we move to 2 p.m. The deck pour is finished, so the main part that we are trying to get accomplished in a day, just because the sheer volume, the number of yards of concrete, is finished at 2 p.m. and the crews are now starting to pour the core and shear walls. So they may be hard to see, but if you see kind of an orange safety fencing material on the roof, those are the areas, and then you see several columns that they are pouring at that point. And so they're starting to set up in that work. And we move forward on the 30th to the end of the day, 5:45 p.m. The concrete columns are just finished, and you can see a truck that is getting ready to leave in the picture, and it's leaving for the day. So you can see when we are looking at an average construction, and I won't say average because they can vary, but when you're looking at examples of why we approve this particular variance, you see that they are pushing well past the 11 hours to complete the project within the confines of the allowed construction hours for the city. And so just a few summary notes on the 30th. The project work time was 14 plus hours on the pour. When I say the word pour, I do mean not only the setup time, the pouring time, and the actual finishing time. And it's important to note that on this particular project, no specific challenges were noted in terms of blocked pumper trucks, which can be quite a challenge on projects. The weather worked with them on this pour, and there were no worker injuries that would have slowed down the situation. So we actually had an optimal situation to get this done in 14 hours. And so I want to move back to the date when I actually issued a citation to Bremick for the 16th. On this particular date, we're at 5:30 in the morning. The concrete pumper is setting up. Move forward to 6:30. By 6:30, we've got the concrete trucks backed up, and they're starting to pour into the form, or into the deck, I should say. We are looking at 4 p.m., and at this point, the concrete deck is finished, and they're starting to pour the columns and shear wall. So you can see we're running a little bit further behind than the last project. And by 6 o'clock p.m., you see the last truck we've captured just leaving the site. And it's actually a little later than 6. It's 6:05 technically. The last truck is leaving. And again, we're looking at, just as a summary, project work time on this particular one was about 13 hours. They were lucky, again, that they did not face any blocked pumper trucks or weather issues slowing down the project. And, after misreading the permit language, the applicant did come in and go through the process to get the variance properly rectified, and they did receive a citation for not having a proper variance in order for this particular date. So I wanted to just say real quick on some of the notes from the appellant. I would not characterize the phone call as saying that they were not going to potentially receive a variance. I said that it was not appropriate to operate without a variance and that they would be cited. So my encouragement of the citizens to give us information to issue citations is the important factor there, and make sure that people feel empowered that we're going to take action. So I do not feel that it would be a fair characterization that I was saying I would absolutely not issue variances. I think it was a characterization on my part that I wanted to be responsive to the issue and make sure that the contractor knew that we were serious. The second component is we're not having private meetings. I called them in, I sat down with them. We have had lots of discussions in the past with folks in different neighborhoods that they want to be at some of these discussions. I don't know that it's possible with 3.5 staff in the noise office to do that on every case. The large projects that we have come before the Noise Review Board, we definitely have a very robust discussion with neighbors. So one of the challenges the city is facing currently is with so much development, we are definitely in a position where the noise office is trying to examine how we adapt to all this construction. And the Noise Review Board has done a wonderful job of putting a construction work group together to examine how the city will move forward with all of our partners in our main partner agencies like ODOT and PBOT and BES, as well as our private construction projects, to figure out how do we do this and incorporate notification and community involvement. And so I wanted to just note for a final summary for council, the noise office always first seeks solutions to nighttime construction. We're not rushing to allow people. It is not a matter of their convenience. Noise variances seek to adapt as best as possible to several unpredictable factors in the development process, such as weather, the temperature, the length of time to complete a given job. The noise office tries to work very efficiently with 3.5 staff to serve the entire community. So one of our challenges is we do have to weigh how many meetings we can have on a given variance to ensure that we are responding to the entire community. And construction noise impacts are just one small part of the work efforts in the noise office. Construction variances historically garner few complaints. And the reason is that we do, by notifying the public, there are opportunities for a dialogue like we had with Mr. Mitchell to respond and try and solve the problem. It is not a perfect scenario when you are impacting people's lives and they're trying to sleep. And that's the big challenge on the table, is how do we best balance that particular factor?
May I ask you a couple of questions, Paul?
Yes.
I'm sorry, is that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
I assumed it was, but that was presumptuous of me, so I apologize. 4 a.m. seems early. What are the consequences of starting, finding a compromise?
Excuse me, Mayor, is your mic on?
Weirdly enough, it is.
Thank you, Carla, for being so even-handed.
Yes, that really was. Thank you.
So as a clarification, the variance is written so the 2 dates where they can start at 4 a.m., those are not the full operation. That's showing up with the pumper truck. That's getting all of the materials set up. So there are some activities that make noise, but it's not the loudest part of the operation. So we recognized within the confines of the 6 pours that they were asking for, that they would potentially have some challenges with weather and other issues, that it may necessitate reasonably 2 dates to start a little bit early. We could push those back. It just may mean their selection of dates may get narrower based on weather in terms of finding dates to squeeze in those
I'm just
pours.
trying to, I'm trying to find a compromise here between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. I'm still sort of trying to figure out why this is here, to be honest with you. So if they were to begin setup at 5 a.m., an hour later, when would the noise start? At 6 a.m.?
6 a.m., which is what we did with the 4 pours.
Okay, and if you start at 6 a.m. with the loud part, when does it finish?
They will work as best as possible based on the weather conditions to get done by 6 p.m. As we can see in the one date where they were just finishing a little bit after.
Okay, so loud noise between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Yeah, and I get the Saturday thing that Commissioner Fish raised. But if those are weak, I mean, is that a huge inconvenience to move it back an hour?
You know, I don't think it's a huge inconvenience. I do think it may be wise, if council moves in that direction, to give a little more time on the tail end to ensure that the contractor's not set up for failure if they're running longer, like we saw, that they will be going till, let's say, 7 p.m.
Well, weirdly enough, I'm wondering if there isn't a variance that you could work out with the appellant that they would be amenable to. In other words, slightly later in exchange for more sleep on the front end or something like that. That's all I'm asking. Then just Idiot's Guide to Concrete Pouring, because I really don't know anything about it. I assume it is imperative that once you start the concrete pour on a floor, you must finish the floor, or is that something that could be broken out over more than one work day? The guys are shaking their head. Yes, I'm an idiot. Okay, very good. So I assume the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
It needs to be completed once you begin it. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I want to second the mayor's comment, because I think there is a difference between starting too early and starting later and maybe be more flexible at the back end. Now, I have to hear from the neighbors, but I just know from my own experience, and where I live, it's garbage trucks. Surprisingly, actually, it's leaf blowers that are now incredibly noisy, and other vehicles. And if your sleep is disturbed at 4 o'clock in the morning, that actually impacts your whole day, and I can give you chapter and verse on that. If someone starts setting up at 5, but the noise doesn't start at 6, that's qualitatively different to me. And Mayor, one of the options we're going to have here is to encourage the parties to see if they can work that out. We don't actually have to decide it. If we wanted to give them a week to see if they can work that out along the lines that you've suggested, if there's a consensus on the council.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out why it would be a problem. I mean, I'm listening to the issues, and so far what I've heard is noise early in the morning, lack of sleep. I'm hearing that your representation of what the construction company needs is a solid full day. And I hear what you're saying with regard to timing, whether no other problems like clogs, injuries on the job, that sort of thing. But this doesn't seem like the parties are that far apart to me.
The other thing is the road appears to be blocked when they do the pours. So we don't have a situation here where it's got to be unblocked at 5 o'clock to address traffic concerns. We've already created an enormous inconvenience by having that road closed. So we're really talking about if there was an iron law that you needed 11 hours to do a pour, just to take that as an example, or 12 hours or whatever, it seems to me we're talking about where's that shifting line. And I'll tip my hand on this. I think 4 o'clock's too early. And the question is it less of an impact if we moved it later? That may end up costing the construction company a little more, with work after 6, but that's less important to me than the quality of life impact.
I could use some clarity, though, because in the letter from David Mitchell and the residents, it says, simply put, our objection is to Bremick's right to initiate this activity any earlier than 7 a.m., but I believe in the testimony you made some kind of concession that perhaps a little earlier would be. I'm not sure. Would they come?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you have to come back
This all has
to
to be
the-
on the record.
yeah.
So if you want to.
Sorry.
The commissioner can certainly ask a question, but you
Yeah.
have to answer into the microphone. If you'd like. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Very good. And if you could state your name again for the record, thank you.
Yes, Dave Mitchell. To clarify our position, we would be very pleased to revert to the standard loud noise commencement at 7 a.m. Monday through Saturday with equipment set up beginning at 6 a.m., which is the existing law. That's all we're asking, is to conform to that. There is no objection on the part of the appellants toward a concrete pour that runs later. I mean, everyone's up, you're around, you're having dinner. That's not as big a deal as a 4 a.m. or a 5 a.m. wake-up call when your ordinary wake-up is perhaps a little later.
Commissioner Fish.
Paul, are we going to hear from Bremick? Is that the name, the Bremick Construction?
Yes.
Are we going to hear from them and have an opportunity to ask them what the impact is of a couple of options that we're clearly considering?
Yes, most definitely.
Because I think that's the missing piece right now, is to understand that dynamic. And councils, it's 4:45, and we have one other item, and my guess is the council is going to start getting grouchy. So I would love to hear, if that's part of your presentation, hear from the contractor, just to give us a little 101 on what they can and can't do.
Yes, they are definitely signed up to be one of the folks to talk for 2 minutes.
And what's the standard end time? It's 7 a.m. to?
7 a.m. to 6 p.m. are the normal allowed construction hours.
Thanks.
So the big challenge, just as a clarification to Dave Mitchell's comment, our expectation would not be set up starting at 6 a.m. without a noise variance. We would expect you to be doing that work starting at 7 a.m. So the standard hours for the city of Portland for loud activities, even the setup can be a bit loud at times, is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I think Dave was saying that he would be willing to accommodate the setup starting at 6, but that would definitely be something we'd wound up writing into a noise variance because it would be outside of the
So
city's
that
code.
would still constitute a variance?
Yes.
Very
yes.
good. Okay, that's good clarity. So the parties are at least moving. They're moving. Good. All right. So you get to use your 15 minutes however you'd like, and I show you have 8 minutes and 10 seconds left.
You know, the way I think we've set ourselves up with the noise board members and Bremick is they're prepared to even speak for 2 minutes during the open time for their testimony. But if it's easier to have them start coming up now, either way, I think it's fine for council, because I think I've finished the 15 minutes I need.
We might as well have them up now, and
Okay.
I'm sure there
Yeah,
will be
most definitely.
questions, and then this way they're not subjected to a 2-minute limitation, and since you're effectively representing their interests, I don't see any problem unless legal counsel sees a procedural issue. Great.
Should I stay up here or should I sit back
Why
down?
don't you stay?
Okay.
That way, if we have any questions, you don't have to walk around. Come on up, whoever's representing Bremen. Hello. Thanks for being here, and if you could state your name for the record.
My name is Josh Ring. I'm the project superintendent for the Canopy Hill project representing Bremick Construction Company.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm here just to be a technical voice about the operations that are taking place. I just want to state for the record that this is, and you've mentioned it before in some of the prior agendas, we're in an unprecedented construction period. There's quite a boom out there, and we all feel the burdens of that. We being boots on the ground, it's one of the major ramifications that we have is trying to organize these sites just around the demand of the industry. But secondly, we've received, and we're all victims of this, 17 and a half inches of rain just in the months of February and March. The actual number of days that constitute dry days is only actually 10. So that extremely narrows our window of opportunity to be able to conduct large pours like Paul had mentioned. And that window gets quite constrained when we're trying to jockey around the hours on which Mother Nature is actually going to give us a dry weather window to pour in. So those are the reasons behind why we've asked for this early morning request. In a perfect world, really, we wouldn't use it. We can do a setup at 6 and pour at 7 o'clock. But Mother Nature is a finical person, and she likes to throw us curveballs. So that's the reason for the request and the reason for the early start. Now, granted, we've got over 20 pours left on this project. We're just asking for a variance on 6. We've conducted 2 of the 6 so far. We only have 4 left. So we're getting close.
Sir, can I just jump in for a sec? Because you just helped me understand a critical part of this. You're backed up because of the rain. I get that. Mm-hmm. But does that mean, however, under the current rules, without the variance, can you complete a pour within the hours that the law already provides you?
Good question, Commissioner. In the current process that we use on our large deck pours, we are utilizing a window that's greater than 11 hours. So we are working either on the front end or on the back end outside of that 11-hour window.
Okay. And does it matter to you whether you work outside that window at the back end or the early end? And if so, why?
Our industry, and particularly in the concrete supply industry, is set up for early starts. They deal with large trucks. Traffic is a major factor. Getting at least the initial supply of the concrete to the construction projects is an integral process to get the pour started and to be able to start the clock in which the finish of the concrete, which is a natural ingredient, actually starts its curing process and becomes hard so that we can actually continue and work it and finish it.
Does that become a cost issue, or is that just a fundamental logistics issue?
Fundamental logistics issue.
So if we fix the traffic problems in Portland, we wouldn't be here. Okay, but you've heard the concerns raised by some neighbors, and frankly, 4 o'clock is just very early, and it's very disruptive. If we were to, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but we're going to have to deliberate. But if we were to decide to give you a variance, but we were to backload it, not front load it, would that still be a win for you?
The issue has to deal with when is the opportunity going to be the dry weather window that we're seeking. It's something that we can't control. It's a variable we can't control. Largely, it's we'd like to start early. We get done earlier. We can get the processing cleaned up and gone sooner. It's difficult to say.
That's independent of the weather. I mean, there are days when it's clear early and not late, and so that really. How does that dovetail with the weather?
If the forecast lands on our pour dates and it's determined that it's going to be obviously weather coming in the front side of the project, then that's a delay day for us. We have to look for the next window of opportunity to do so. In a busy industry, we're all fighting over the same day, and that's where the challenges really lie. There's multiple projects trying to do the same thing we're doing, all fighting for the same dry weather window. That puts a heavy burden on the concrete supply providers, and there's 4 major providers here in the Portland marketplace. And they can't, they're struggling with the process of just trying to keep up, so they try to spread the load or the demand across the entire window of the day, depending on what processes and who's pouring and what attributes are going on. They do tend to schedule the slab or the deck pours, the processes that need to take the ample amount of time to finish, on the front side or the early side. So if our project was restricted in that window, it just means that we would probably likely miss another day, and if that opportunity be given to another contractor.
And who bears that cost in your business?
Largely the contractors do, depending on how the contracts are set up with the clients. In some cases, if we're able to prove that it's a rain day and there's measurable rainfall, we're given a variance on our scheduled day, if that makes sense.
Should I call next person up?
Is that, if that's the end of your presentation, we can go to the next group of people who are other opponents of the appeal? Great, thank you, appreciate it. So,
Thanks for your time.
Sorry? Oh, yeah, thank you. So now we go to other opponents of the appeal, 2 minutes each.
Okay, I have Scott Schaefer, Betsy Reese, and Melissa Stewart.
And if you could please just state your name for the record again. Thank you.
Scott Schaefer, representative of the Pacific Northwest Council of Carpenters and Local 1503.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, go ahead. Thank you for having me today. I'm here to ask the City Council not to repeal the noise variance. I've heard from you guys trying to understand how this works. The early morning is to start that pour to be able to get this concrete to set up. These decks are huge. The way these concrete decks set up, it takes a long time to be able to get to the point where they can finish it. That finishing process gets started to where they can start to pour the columns, and they can pour the core elevator and the other walls. If we try and speed this process up, it becomes a safety hazard for all the workers that are there. There was a building up and a deck pour up in Seattle within the last month that collapsed. Luckily, no one was hurt during this time. We need to make sure that, yes, the people need to be able to have some sort of relevant of sleep, but to be able to move on these projects like this within that time frame, it is really hard to get all that into one day in a safe manner. These workers are highly trained and they know what they're doing, and that amount of time that it takes to do this project is the amount of time that it takes. Of course, like Josh was just saying, you have concrete companies that are trying to get the concrete out to you. If there's a hiccup in that, it takes a little bit longer. You're waiting on concrete. You have 20 guys sitting there trying to get it going. Once that process starts moving, they're trying to do it in the fastest, most quickest way possible. I mean, I'm here to be concerned about the workers and wanting to make sure that everyone goes home safe within the allotted amount of time.
Since you're the expert that we get to ask here, so the variance, runs from 4 to 6. If the council decided to move it from 5 to 7, doesn't that still meet your needs?
I would assume, I don't speak for Bremick, I speak for the workers of our labor pool with the council. Obviously, that extended amount of time would be able to do that, but as long as, it's within a safe work environment, I can't really say that that would be yay or nay, but the later you get in the day, the tired more, they get more, tired, and safety factors become an issue.
Thank you. Good afternoon. No, could you push the button, please?
Hi, my name is Betsy Reese, and I'm speaking today in support of issuing the permits, although I'm far from without empathy for the appellants. Over a 15-year period, I stood up for our 80-plus inner-city apartment tenants, defending their right to peacefully enjoy their homes. Among the over 12 protracted noise issues that we worked through during that time, most were clear violations of the law, and we had a number of construction noise variances granted. Never once were my concerns dismissed. The Portland Noise Control Office, Paul Van Orden, helped empower me to resolve issues directly with our commercial and industrial neighbors or with construction contractors. He unwaveringly enforced the noise ordinance no matter who was on the other side of the conflict when we could not work it out. And yes, he did sometimes have to tell me that a noise variance was necessary for the progress of our city and for the greater good. For example, our building being on North Broadway, a major arterial, the Portland East Side streetcar, was granted multiple variances for all-night work, tearing up the street, laying streetcar rails. This is outside a historic building that does not have climate control on warm summer nights with open tenant windows. We and our tenants were grateful for the action that was taken to attenuate the noise and light disturbance that comes with these projects. And we were especially grateful for the heads up on the dates and times so that although we could not control it, the noise was at least predictable, making it easier to tolerate. To me, the overriding issue is our Portland Noise Control Office has no more staff today than it did in 1976 when it was founded.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Was there a Melissa Stewart? Okay. And we'll go with Desi Wright.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm just speaking for the Noise Review Board. I just simply want to make sure.
Could you please state your name for the
Oh,
record?
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Melissa Stewart.
Thank you.
I hope you understood that it's the size of the pour, and that's just part of the project, that determines whether a variance is asked for. And typically, it hasn't been a problem, and the chair delegates the responsibility to give the variance when it's asked for as a matter of administrative facility. We don't usually get involved in it, and it's unfortunate that it has to come to you to determine what happens with an appeal, but there's not a hearings officer to deal with it. So sorry if it's taking too much time, but we really don't have an appeal very frequently. So I hope you take that into consideration.
Understood. Thank you, Commissioner.
Just speaking for myself, these appeals give us a chance to hear issues that we, in a structured form, which I actually find very helpful. And it has not, from time to time, I even recall Commissioner Fritz then pursuing legislative changes based on what we've learned. So while, I mean, we should be apologizing to you for the time that we ask you to serve and then be here, we have the highest regard for Paul's work. But these are actually, I find these very helpful because I learn a lot about how we're getting these livability issues. We have the chance to hear from construction professionals and others, and our job is to balance a number of things. And I wouldn't want to have one of these every week, but this is, I find very helpful for the council in just understanding these issues and in essence, trying to do justice, trying to find the middle ground. But thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I want to second that. And to be clear, my comment was really, I was fishing to understand what our role actually was here and where the breakdown was, if any. Because as I was listening to the testimony, I was hearing what initially sounded like two parties who were not very far apart. So that was the only implication of the comments I made earlier. And I do appreciate your being here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Desi Wright. I'm a resident of Sullivan's Gulch neighborhood. And also I'm a representative with the Northwest Regional Council of Carpenters. I'm actually the pile drivers representative. We also do concrete work as well. I just wanted to say, I mean, as a resident of Portland, I see the growing pains, and it's changed a lot just in the decade I've been in the Gulch, and we see it, and it's looking like it's going to keep going on for a few more years. As long as all these projects are in place, there's a lot of aspects that go into the timing, especially when you come into these big concrete pours. The availability to close streets is one thing that we run into. The availability to get concrete trucks, the availability to get workers, and I mean, Normally, in the construction industry, we start 7 a.m. until the job's done. It's not normally something where you go in and you punch a clock at 7 and you punch a clock at 3:30. We start and we're there till it finishes. I know that sometimes starting in the early morning hours is difficult, but also please keep in mind that a lot of our members do not live in Portland. We're seeking workers from all over Oregon to come help us build Portland right now. These are guys that wake up well before the sun comes up, drive an hour or 2 hours to Portland to work. And I'd just like you to keep in mind that these guys are up and out the door before their children wake up, and they are coming home right before their children go to bed. So if we push these pours to start back later, I mean, our members aren't going to be able to spend time with their families if this is the direction things go.
Thank you.
The last person I show is Carrie Stanley.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Oh, okay. I'm Kerry Stanley. I'm the professional, acoustical profession representative on the Noise Review Board. And just for a little background, I was on the Noise Review Board for 25 years prior to the time when the decision was made to limit the number of years you could be on it. I've been asked to come back after a 6-year delay or off of it. So I've got quite a bit of experience in dealing with variances on the board. And what I've been hearing from you is that you're finding it's difficult to make decisions like this, to get the conditions right. We face that all the time, and that's why you've got this appeal. The board did not make this decision, but we had made decisions similar to it, where Mr. Van Orden saw the kind of the direction the board was going. We then allowed for the noise control officer to take on some of those responsibilities without having to come to the board. And what I understand is that he made a decision to allow for a couple of these pours, the preparation work to start at 4 a.m., but that the pour itself wouldn't begin until 5 a.m. And there are 2 of those that you're hearing about. And then the other 4 were to start preparation at 5, pours begin at 6. So it's not quite, like he said, it's not the full noise starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, but there is some noise. And just also wanted to comment on the fact that, if you recall, if you can think about it, the ordinance doesn't say you can't have construction between 6 p.m. and 7 a.m. It says you have to do it within the constraints of the noise limits that are applicable at the time. So what the 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. does is allows more noise to occur, and that's all it does. It doesn't. There's no restriction on construction.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Very good. And at this point, there's an opportunity for the appellant to do 5 minutes of rebuttal if they would like.
And this chair is just right.
Very good. Thank you.
I'll be very brief at the outset. I've spent 45 years of my career working in the healthcare business with hospitals and physicians. And I'm accustomed to working with orthopedists and cardiac surgeons that love to start surgery early, even though nurses and others may wish to come in later. With healthcare reform and cost incentives and motivations changing, the whole business is changing as part of an overall paradigm. And I would say that probably the construction industry needs to be a little more flexible, particularly in densely populated areas. In New York City, Mayor Bloomberg has done a phenomenal job of dealing with these kinds of issues, starting with pile driving, et cetera. Secondly, part of the motivation in our building to file this appeal is hopefully to establish a precedent, because we have, within the next 6 months, right next door to this canopy project, the framework project, which involves a demolition and albeit a very innovative wood frame construction that nonetheless will carry with it noise considerations. Down between Cooch and Everett, we have a half a block, 14-story building. And I would see that your decision on this appeal probably would represent an important precedent for the Noise Control Office. If you were to perhaps accept our request to go with a 2-hour later start time, 6 a.m. setup, 7 o'clock pour, presumably that would be enforced with other projects in our area and throughout the city. Mary?
Okay, I'm going to have to talk fast. I'm going to give you some examples of my observations. In 2015, I observed a concrete pour at the 26-story apartment project across the street from where I live. Anderson Construction had a very large pour using 2 pumps scheduled to begin at 5 a.m. that morning. They had a mechanical pump breakdown, which we've heard about. As it turned out, they did not begin until 9 a.m. that morning. In spite of the late start, they were finished spreading, finishing, and everybody was gone at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. During the construction of the 28-story Cosmopolitan on the other side of the building where I live, Anderson was able to do every single pour after 7 a.m., and part of the reason is they broke things up. They didn't always do the pillars the same day that they did the floor. They didn't always do the elevator the same day. But we're talking about 30 stories. We're talking about more than 30 pours. Last April, Walsh Construction notified neighbors that they wanted to apply for a permit to start a concrete pour at 3 a.m. When I contacted the project supervisor, he admitted that their main concern was disrupting traffic. When I pointed out he'd be disrupting the sleep of over 300 neighbors, he said, oh, I'll go back to the drawing board, and they ended up getting a variance permit for a 5 a.m. start. So obviously the 3 a.m. start was desirable, not necessary. This is what one resident experienced the day of that 5 a.m. pour. They began at 5:40. At 5:44, they had 7 trucks on site. At 5:48, they had 8 trucks on site. At 6 a.m., they had 3 trucks lined up in front of the Elizabeth with 5 on site. At 10:20, they had 10 trucks in the vicinity. It was loud, and when I decided to try to go back to sleep, I put in earplugs, headphones, and a pillow over my head, and I could still hear it quite well. Nothing really changed with their traffic control throughout the pour. I never noticed any traffic backup. I was at the site of Bremick's 4 a.m. concrete pour on March 30th. They began setup at 4 a.m. Concrete trucks began to arrive at 5, right as the permit granted. I returned at noon and watched the last concrete truck leave the site at 12:30 p.m. When I went back at 2:30, it appeared that all of the spreaders, the finishers, everyone was gone, and there were just workers, a couple of workers working on the pillars. There were no pump trucks. Around 3 p.m., they locked up the gates. At 4:30, there were just the workers working on the pillars. The pump truck was leaving the site. I was also on site for their pour at 6 a.m. this past Saturday. I arrived at 5:45. They were just beginning to unlock the gates and begin setup. Setup was completed at 6:40. The first concrete truck arrived on site, and they began pouring at 6:50 a.m. I went back to the site at 1:30. There were no concrete trucks on site. The pump, spreaders, finishers, everybody was gone. As you can see from those photos that I gave you at the morning start and at 3 o'clock, what it looked like. I went back to the site at 4 p.m., and there was no one in sight. Bremick's project is not the only project that was pouring that Saturday, last Saturday. Anderson Construction began pouring at 5 o'clock at 13th and Johnson. I went by there at 5:30 on my way down to the Bremick site. Can I finish? Okay, I've only got a couple things. Okay, anyhow, they started at 5, and when I went by at 1 o'clock, they were finished. Anderson Construction also did a pour at 11th and Pettygrove on Saturday. They started at 7 o'clock. They told me that they would be doing all of their concrete pours at 7 o'clock. This is a 20-story building. So the bottom line is, if Bremick feels that they can't complete their pours within the 11-hour window, what we ask is, please do not allow any more 4 and 5 a.m. pours, 6 o'clock at the earliest, and quite honestly, nothing on a Saturday before 7 o'clock. We need to shift the paradigm of starting early, not disrupting traffic, and give consideration to the fact that we have hundreds of people living in this densely populated area.
Thank you very much. And I've given the appellant 1 extra minute. I don't know if the principal opponent would like 1 extra minute or not, in the interest of fairness. we're
Can
good.
I answer your question about why you're here and the number of?
I think I have that
Okay.
pretty well understood
Yeah.
at this point. Thank you,
Yeah.
though. And
Yeah,
I
in the
was,
past, there haven't been appeals because we haven't been able to meet the 10-day limit.
got it. Thank you. Great. Okay, so that brings us then to the end of the discussion. Now we're at the point of council discussion. We can talk about next steps. The noise control officer had requested that we tentatively take up this issue and give them some direction to come back with next week. And at this point, I'd entertain any thoughts my fellow commissioners might have on the subject.
Mayor?
Commissioner Fish? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Mayor, may I just,
Aha.
I just want
Great.
to remind council, though, in,
We know, it's tentative.
no, I just want to articulate the facts on which you are making your tentative recommendation so that Mr. Van Orden can draft the ordinance. That was it.
Commissioner Fish?
So this has been a very thoughtful and useful hearing. And when I asked Paul, Mr. Van Orden, who is a regular before council, whether this was more art than science, he said more art. And what I was looking for was sort of guidance from him as to what's really prescribed versus where is that gray area we'll use our best judgment. And we appreciate the judgment that the board makes, and we appreciate the judgment that the hearing officer makes. I think I am becoming more influenced by the fact that I live in a building in a dense area and am impacted by this more. And I have a greater sensitivity to how this does affect people, their sleep patterns, their health, their whatever. So currently, Mayor, my view is the way I would slice this is I would not grant the variance for any weekend work, and I would consider the variance for the other days, non-Saturdays, but I would prefer that we start an hour later and extend the clock an hour. And this is, we would not be setting a precedent. These cases are unique, but I think that's a way to slice it, to take Saturdays off, not to give a variance for Saturday, because I think that early start time is just disruptive, and I think people need 2 days to rest. But to shift the hours from 4 to instead of starting at 4, start at 5, shift it an extra hour, and I don't think that will, from what I've heard, interfere with the ability to get the concrete pours.
And that's just on weekdays, and
Yes,
on weekends,
that would be my
go back to
suggestion.
the standard ordinance. Very good. Commissioner Fritz?
We weren't asked at the beginning whether we had any ex parte contacts or potential conflicts of interest. I do want to state that my son and daughter-in-law live at Park and Flanders, which is just kind of kidsy quarter to this. I've had no discussions with them about this. I am very familiar, however, with the area. And one of the reasons I'm familiar with the area is because we had some challenges with the North Park blocks and people sleeping there and being there during the day. And it was alleged by some of the neighbours that businesses closing was due to that factor. So I agree with your suggestion to not allow any variances on weekends. I do wonder whether there will be people who would be impacted by shifting the times, in particular businesses that are going to be relying on customers over the dinner hour, for example, which is a different set of people that would be impacted.
The one, I know that area, I mean, you and I both know that area very well because of the park. I have no ex parte contacts on this. But because that street is closed, because they're closing the north-south street in front of the building to do the pours, and there is no restaurant on that street, I think that's less of a concern.
And so that would be your reason for saying this is a very specific
It's a site-specific solution. I don't like the idea of the variance on the weekends for the reasons you and I agree on. But because of the concerns raised by the construction company about competing for concrete, and we've heard concerns about worker safety and those things, I'm not in a position to dispute they need the extra time. I just suggest we shift it an hour so it's less impactful in that early morning hour.
And is the noise, I'm going to look at Paul for a yes or a no nod, how does the noise extend for several blocks around the site, or is it more specific to the immediate vicinity?
You know, for these operations, we would expect that people within about 2 blocks are impacted by it, so it does extend a little bit more. Real quick, though, on the question of later end noise in terms of running into the night and impacting hotels, we tend to be at the quieter operations by the end of the pour, so it shouldn't be a notable impact on restaurant, bar type uses.
That's very helpful, because I know there's art galleries and such in that area, so that I share your, confirm your, where you're leading us, Commissioner Fish.
Oh, it's already on. I am largely in accord with Commissioner Fish. I'd say that would be my absolute limit, the 5 a.m. setup, 6 a.m. begin. I might be persuaded to push it forward another hour. And I agree with a weekend, no variance on the weekend. I do want to say that having lived almost in that neighborhood, a few blocks away from the neighborhood, and having had a business downtown, I mean, when you live and site your business down there, you can just expect a level of construction that you don't deal with typically throughout the city, and that the construction that built the buildings that people are living in now were disrupting someone else's sleep and lives, so we have to strike a balance there.
Commissioner, the one factor that influenced my thinking was the amount of rain we've had. And of course, construction cycles don't necessarily anticipate the rain, but this particular project has been hammered by the rain. And I'm thinking a little more flexibility to allow them to stay on. And when we heard from the contractor that this may be a cost borne by the contractor and not the operator, I would feel a little differently. That concerns me, because we're talking about local jobs versus the Hilton Corporation or whoever's going to be there, and I'd be loath to impose too many costs on our local contractor.
And I also like to add, I have had no ex parte contact on this matter. This is the business or industry my family was in, so I might have a little bit more greater understanding, I guess, of how complex these operations can be and how costly delays are. I also grew up with a dad that left before I got up for school and came home late, and I am now in that position myself. So I think.
So
Are
let me say this, and by the way, for these types of hearings, we don't have to declare ex parte contacts, and that's,
okay.
I did clarify that. I think we should, just so that all hearings that come before the city council are consistent, so we sort of know the routine. So I will likewise declare I have no ex parte contacts on this matter, although I certainly know some of the people involved. That being said, I strongly support Commissioner Fish's thinking. You know, it goes all the way back to the first public comment we had this morning. I like this compromise, nobody else will. I think it is a rational compromise given the two competing forces that we've heard. I don't think the construction company will be particularly happy, and I don't think that the local residents will be particularly happy, but I think it's bringing it closer to the center. And so I appreciate your efforts on a fairly split community, if I can use that word, community view on this, at least between the appellant and the opponent. I think this seems like a reasonable middle ground. Now, what Paul had asked is we give a tentative direction to him to bring back, if I'm understanding correctly, Mr. Van Orden, a more formal interpretation next week, or what is your preference as the noise ordinance officer? What product would you like us to deliver, given that we've stated a preference?
I think you've given me clear enough direction that we can frame this into your intention, so you have something to move on, and so that there won't be confusion at the next meeting for the appellant or for the noise office. So I think we're in a good position to write up the direction you'd like us to head. I don't think there's too many
Is
layers.
this the equivalent then of a first reading on an ordinance? Or what is the framework under which we operate this?
It's a little bit different. I think what we intend to do is draft up an order, and then you'll vote on it next week formally, saying, yes, this is the order.
Okay, so that the record is closed on this hearing, you will provide us with final language, and we will take it up effectively as we would a second reading. Is that correct? Okay.
And the most important thing is Mr. Van Orden nodding that he has the sufficient direction that he needs to craft the compromise.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no formal vote required today?
That part, I better leave that to just make sure that the city attorney makes that call.
I understand from your comments, the vote is 4-0 for this approach, and then we'll draft it up in that order.
Perfect.
Okay.
And I do want to thank everybody for your participation in this hearing. It's been very helpful on all sides to let us know what the challenges are, and I hope that this will work better for both sides.
Thank you. So, colleagues, I have a question for you. We never got to 382 this morning. We do have staff present. If you'd like to take up 382 now, I'm seeing one no.
So here, I have...
We could hold it off to next week with profuse apologies to HR staff that have been here for hours.
I have a conflict, but I would like to have it resolved this week. How long is the presentation, Commissioner?
It's not
2
so
minutes?
much the length of the presentation as the length of the discussion. I also have to leave shortly, so.
If we put this on tomorrow afternoon at 2 and then just bump the time certain a half an hour, would that be satisfactory?
If we're allowed to bump the time certain?
The mayor has vast powers.
Okay.
Well, I wouldn't say we would bump it till 2:30. The time certain means it won't start before then. So we are allowed to alter the amendment. We would do this remaining item before it, and then as soon as
we set this over then, Carla, till 2 o'clock tomorrow?
Ahead of the Art Museum one, yes, we could, if we say so
Okay, but
now.
could all of us, could we please look at the HR staff and thank them and acknowledge they've been sitting here, off and on for approximately 7 hours. So, and the children and everybody else. Thank you. With that, we have moved it till tomorrow with your forbearance and appreciation. We are adjourned.